focus. So okay, when it's over, I want to start my own business. Tomorrow mornings will go. It's like I don't have that time to, soak up my whole life in the trade. I'm trying to get out of it. I retired at 55. So I got 7 more years sometime. So that's what 30 years in the trade and still doing what I want to do. But yeah, I would love to. It's not a group to like bring black men in that direction. I would love to be a part of that. Yeah, first of all, I was saying congratulations. So like you did a lot of good. And my dad was an HVAC professional. He's now here retired in Florida. We love his. What's that word again? The pension. It's a pension. Yeah, pension. Yeah, I won't have. Substantially more than he does. Those are the things, the type of things that I was talking about when I was saying earlier. One of the things I congratulate about California is that they're very protective of their workers' rights. So a lot of the companies that are exploiting them are not with the truck. They know they can't do that shit in California. And that's what I was talking about earlier when I was I'm just like, how are you for it? Like some older lady, shout out to her. Like some of those little few years older. Boy, you are funny. I'm cracking up. That was the richest stuff. I wanted them with the food was everything. Like, absolutely. It was just like good day. So he had a man that he flew in like. Eternal companion, help us pour out our hearts to you, honestly and sincerely. These prayers as our guide help us feel close to God. Life makes warriors of us all. To emerge the victors, we must arm ourselves with the most potent of weapons. That weapon is prayer. Actions. No place too far for us. Tell me this. Is there some secluded spot in the vicinity where I can go and pray? Congressman asked. He had just arrived in Breslov, the town whose name the Breslov movement has borne ever since. Another place that would be most suitable, the Hasid replied, but it's quite far from here. Father Rebbe explained, what do you mean by far? Far from the mind or from the heart? Nachman later taught, when your heart yearns, distance is no obstacle. Praise my God, I work and I strive, never knowing if I will succeed. You and only you can give hope to my dreams with your divine spared wasted efforts. With your blessing, all hardship I endure can bear fruit. You and only you are the key to success in all that I do. Courage to grow, Almighty God, source of all the energy of life. Without you, I am helpless. Give me the courage, the physical drive, the emotional energy, and the spiritual will to risk in order to grow, to welcome every challenge as my life unfolds. Full life. O life of the world, grant me a full life, a life which may be considered long because it has been filled with right living, and considered rich because it has been filled with holy acts. Making ends meet, source of all sustenance, sustain me nowadays, or even living simply, working only to acquire life's most basic necessities, demands so much. The black, help me see my way out of this monstrous tangle of debts, the inevitable outlay for my children's needs, those overwhelming expenses and bills, those inescapable medical expenditures, but most of all, dear God, help me keep my account with you in the black. Body and soul, Holy One, grant me the strength to cast off this spiritual sluggishness and indifference which encumber my body, let my body together with my soul soar ever closer to you. Teaching my being, dear God, teach me to embody those ideals I would want my children to learn from me. Let me communicate with my children wisely in ways that will draw their hearts to kindness, to decency, and to true wisdom. Dear God, let me pass on to my children only the good. Let them find in me the values and behavior I hope to see in them. Wholeness and well-being, God of wholeness, God of healing, envelop us with wholeness and well-being. Heal us in body and soul. Let all the elements of our bodies work together in perfect symmetry and in peaceful harmony. Remove every trace of illness, every hint of infirmity. Send healing which you alone can bring. Sincerity, O you who are infinitely deep, yet also profoundly simple. Help me walk this simple path. Free me from any facade of sophistication, which will only hinder my endless quest to come closer to you. Help me live my life with faith, with sincerity, and with perfect simplicity. Giving, my God, help me become a giver. Help me give and go on giving. You've called on us to be charitable. Show me how. Show me how to give with a pure heart, and an open heart with a heart filled with joy. Let me lead me to those who are truly deserving, for giving is so holy an act. Help me find the truly needy and help them find me. True nourishment. Dear God, teach me to eat right and to eat for the right reasons. Keep me from eating the wrong foods and from eating more than I should. Let all that I eat nourish me, never weaken or harm me. Let the food I ingest create a perfect balance within me, in my body, mind, and soul. Gaining perspective. Dear God, I need your guidance. Bring perspective to my life. For the meaningless allures of this world control me. Let me see beyond the coarse requirements of my daily subsistence. Let me bask in that which is truly precious, the beauty of my relationship with you, dear God. Working to live, though I have no choice but to work to support myself and those who depend on me. Let my job never dominate my life and psyche. Let me never be so caught up in the pursuit of my livelihood that I stoop to dishonesty in order to get ahead. Let me make no transaction without recognizing that any measure of success I might find, I can come only from you. Oh God, see my pain, see the constant tension and anxiety with which I must function, with which I don't function. Touch my life with your love and your strength. With your wisdom, I have more than I can bear alone. Troubles, kind, loving, mighty God, stretch out your hand to strengthen me. Lift me up from my abyss. And and Larry and Siam, or Sam, I guess it's Siam. Welcome. Steve, Anand, and Larry, you get the gold, the silver, and the bronze star for being the first, the second, and the third into the room. Siam and Yasi, you get honorable mentions. Hello there, Chuck. Welcome aboard as well. I thought we would take our focus away from Iran for a moment and talk about the hurricane data, Marshall, which that data is no longer available as of today, and also food bank cuts, which we've never really delved into before, because of a story in the New York Times today, which said that the food banks in New York City are at a crisis, and now that I've researched it, I see that there are many other cities as well. So those are our topics today. Christopher Hansen, Albers, welcome. Hansen wrote a piece which was prompted by mine in the Critical Thinking Forum Substack page, a deeper dive into an analysis of what happened with those strikes on the 3 nuclear facilities in Iran. I think we were talking about 2 different things in our various essays, but it was a great follow-up to mine because I don't have the background to talk about what really happened there. My essay was more about us
talking about facts and not knee-jerking our response based on our political ideology. So I think they complement one another, actually. Welcome to the Critical Thinking Forum. We're going to get started in just a few minutes. Steve Wee, welcome to the stage. Scott, welcome to the stage.
Thank you, Gary. I feel that was very a bit of a rating, and what it lacked in gusto, it made up for it in hospitality.
Was there a lack of gusto?
Well, Gary, you have such gusto. It's a hard. You're a tough measure, even against yourself.
Well, I haven't had much sleep lately. My sleep patterns have been all foolhardy. But yesterday I actually went to Brooklyn for a presentation at the Avenue N Jewish Center, which is a synagogue. It's name. And holy cow, it was unbelievable how arduous the trip was there and back. When you look as far as the crow flies from my house to my destination, you think, it wouldn't take long. No. Transportation is always a challenge in the New York area. Welcome everybody to the Critical Thinking Forum. Here are the rules for your Monday through Friday from 5 p.m. to 6 p.m. New York time. Top of the hour, I will toss out my opening salvo, which hopefully will encourage you to participate. And if you wish to just raise your hand and come up onto the stage, you can wait until something is offered on the stage, which prompts you to want to join us up here. Or if you wish, based on the topic and anticipation, you can come up now, as has Steve, and welcome as well to Alan to the stage. Generally speaking, after people speak, they're removed from the stage to the audience. This is not punitive in nature, but only to make it possible for me to maintain the cue. I call people in the order in which I see them, which may not coincide with the order in which you see yourself on the stage. So if it appears I've skipped over you, just be patient. I always get to everybody who's on the stage. Since we are here from 5 to 6 p.m. New York time, at about 5 minutes to 6, we will no longer be inviting people onto the stage. But if at the 6 o'clock hour you are in queue, we'll go into extra time to give everybody an opportunity to speak. Unlike many of the other rooms on Clubhouse, in the Critical Thinking Forum, we endeavor to speak one at a time and not to interrupt one another. And we treat each other with a degree of decorum and respect, even when we vehemently disagree. And for that, I thank you in advance. Welcome to the Critical Thinking Forum. Welcome to the stage, Brent, with your pretty puppy on your screenshot there, your profile pic. We are less than a minute away from starting, precisely at the top of the hour. So guess what's up here? Synergy and Rep John. There you go.
And there's a huge thing before we get started. Interesting piece. I just got a little brother. Apparently, there are no such cuts that no funding. He gave me a document to look
I
at.
think there are, and I will delineate that. But if you want to challenge that, feel free. What is your opportunity?
I think that's probably what I'm going to do, because he's been working on the big beautiful bill for the better part of like 2 months.
This is not the big beautiful bill. This is something that takes effect today. Okay, we're seconds away from the top of the hour. Welcome Alan to the stage as well. And John, who I think I welcomed before you got up here. We're now at the top of the hour. Welcome to the Critical Thinking Forum. We are here Monday through Friday from 5 p.m. to 6 p.m. New York time. And today's topic is are the hurricane data and food bank cuts good public policy? And you may wonder why, when the food bank cuts occurred some time ago, we are talking about that along with the hurricane data cuts, which take effect today. And I will tell you why. There was a story in the New York Times this morning that caught my attention, which said that as a result of those cuts, which I believe the spring sometime. I've got that data in front of me, and I'll get to it in a second. But as a result of that, food banks here in New York City are really hurting. They're not being able to meet the demand. And so I actually posted that to the chat, which is linked above, this morning. And I asked, maybe rhetorically, I'm wondering whether this affects other cities around the nation. And so that prompted me to do a little research today. And the answer is yes, it is not unique to New York. So while we have one issue that is current, the other one is current in the sense that it is continuing. So let me, and I'm glad that Marshall jumped in there in advance because maybe there's a misconception. These cuts to the hurricane data information, they are Defense Department satellite data cuts. And they have absolutely nothing to do with the big, beautiful bill that is being voted on in the Senate today and was voted on earlier in the House of Representatives, which is something that we will obviously be getting into after the vote. But what the Trump administration did is they pulled the plug on the processing and distribution of microwave data. And this is a little technical, and I'm going to try to say it in non-technical terms because I don't even understand it from a technical standpoint. But from 3 satellites that are jointly operated by the Defense Department and NOAA. And the data includes these special sensor microwave imager sounder information. So basically what it does is that it peers through the clouds. So the issue is that at night, it's the only way they can really see like the eye of the storm. When the storm is well offshore, it's too far away for the hurricane hunting aircraft to fly into the center of it. And at night, otherwise you really can't see what is developing. So the whole idea is that if people are in the potential path of a hurricane, you want to give them as much reliable and advanced information as possible so that they can make the decisions with as much information as possible to be armed with on whether or not to evacuate or whatever decisions they think that they have to make. The earlier you start giving people information, which we know historically changes from hour to hour sometimes, much less day to day, but as much information as you can give them to give them an idea of what the potential strength of a storm may be is really paramount towards saving lives. So the experts are warning that there will be a degradation or degradation, I think is the proper word, of data as a result of this. Nighttime blind spots, and along with this lack of use of this data are layoffs among NOAA. So there are fewer people to analyze data today than there was yesterday, because this takes effect today. And by the way, it's not just, I didn't know this until I started researching this, the satellite information, but it's weather balloon information as well. They are reducing the number of weather balloon launches. Now, with regard to the food banks cuts, the USDA, under the president, canceled or paused more than $1 billion in funding across a number of food security initiatives. The Emergency Food Assistance Program, which sent truckloads of food to state and local warehouses, and the local food purchase and farm to school grants. Those supported school lunch, fresh produce via farmers. Those were cut as well, substantially. So, as I said early on here, what prompted this was the New York Times article, which was about the food banks in New York that are struggling. I decided to take a deeper dive into this. In Virginia, and these are just, I'm just going to list a handful of them. There are probably more, but you get the idea. In Virginia, the Blue Ridge Area Food Bank lost nearly $1.5 million in funding. In New York, in Washington, D.C., the capital area food bank had to cancel 670,000 meals. Nearly $3.5 million pulled from Massachusetts. Funding cut in half in the Hudson Valley of New York State. In Nevada, the Food Bank of Northern Nevada lost £1 million. This is how they're assessing it in meat and dairy. That bank serves 160,000 people, which is up 76% from before the pandemic. Houston lost 11 million. 60 fewer USDA tractor-trailer loads monthly. 15% of the budget gone. More than 200 seniors no longer can get. What they're saying is 200 fewer seniors a month who got food from that food bank are getting it now. 1 million meals lost in Delaware, and in Tampa Bay, 20 million meals lost to the food bank. So, of course, the government has a response to all of this. NOAA is pushing back, and those who are raising this issue, they are claiming that discounting the ingestion of the DoD microwave data is simply part of a standard process of data rotation and replacement. And they say that other satellites are providing microwave sensing. The experts say no. The reporting on the experts says say no, but this is the government's position. And as is notable about the Trump administration, when there's a conflict such as that, it's the fault of the media. So NOAA is accusing the media of sensationalizing the issue and fueling unnecessary panic. As far as USDA programs, the USDA, I went to their website, they're describing the process as a rigorous line-by-line review. It's designed to remove spending that, according to their website, is, quote, contrary to the needs of ordinary working Americans. And programs that are tied to, quote, radical gender and climate ideologies. I frankly don't understand what that means, but the programs that were pulled, according to Ag Secretary Rollins, quote, no longer effectuate the goals of the agency. Okay, so, when we elect whoever it is the president, it doesn't matter who the president is, we expect that the president will have an administration, and that administration will effectuate programs that are necessary and designed for the benefit of society as a whole. So I guess there is a philosophical question here over whether the two programs to which we are referring today are truly beneficial to society as a whole. Is it costly to grab that data from the DoD satellites that are still up there generating the data and use it for hurricane weather predictions? maybe it's too costly to be able to grab and analyze that data. And it's to the benefit, it is this good public policy to pull the plug on that. I don't know. Nobody's saying that the satellites are dysfunctional now. So the data is still being generated. But maybe there's something there that I'm not seeing because I'm influenced by the news media that is sensationalizing this issue. I would just say, in fairness to my brethren, every story that I've seen on this is not quote the news media close quote sensationalizing. It's the experts that they are interviewing, meteorologists, former NOAA employees, I guess, who are sensationalizing this. In fairness, if it is an exaggeration of the threat, blame the people who are being interviewed. And there are a number of experts, or in the case of those who disagree, so-called experts, who are saying that this could very potentially cost lives. Okay, the food bank, when you cut money to food banks, is it because the food banks are distributing food to people who are not eligible? And by cutting the money to those food banks, which are still struggling to stay in operation, have you changed the policies of the food banks? I'm reading the administration's explanation of both of these cuts. You've heard them. You've heard exactly what I've read. Frankly, I can't wrap my mind around the explanation. Maybe some of you can and can expand on it in a way that makes sense of all this to people like me and others who are, quote, sensationalizing, close quote, the issue. So with that, we'll call people in the order in which we see them. And today that order begins with Marshall. Marshall? Marshall. I am right here. All right, come on.
Go, Marshall. Yeah. So I think what we're talking about is the proposed budget bill, not the new bill.
No, we are not.
No.
We are not. These are cuts with regard to the food banks that took place in the spring, and the data flow was cut off as of today from the satellites. Nothing to do with the Big Beautiful.
It's just to do with the Trump administration through OMB clawing back money.
I don't know whether it's through OMB. I don't know the process in which it's
it would be through the office.
Okay, but whatever, the clawing back money is accurate, I guess. I don't know whether money is clawed back with regard to the satellites because they're still up there generating the data. Although they did lay off some people at NOAA, so presumably those were the people who were analyzing the data. Maybe we didn't need them, nor the data that they were analyzing. I can't imagine that that's a major cut to the budget. But anyway, yes.
I will tell you, having a younger brother who redid the NOAA NASA reauth in 2018 reauthorization, he's not worried about it at all, not even a little bit. And the only conclusion I can draw from that, since he's been on the Hill for 10 years, is that they're not making cuts in places that are like detrimental to NOAA's functioning. I would not only does have power granted by Congress to claw back monies, they are not allowed to not distribute them. So they have to redistribute them at some point for the authorization language. But the Office of Management and Budget does have the ability to slow roll claw back money.
And the premise of the questions they asked are now whether they are authorized to do this. The question is whether this is good public policy to do.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, look, I'm going to go a little brother intimately aware of the functioning of NOAA and NASA, since that was what he did for a whole year and a half of his life. So I'm going to lean more on the side of, no, this is not as detrimental as we might think it is.
So how do you reconcile his analysis with that of the plethora of meteorologists and other experts who have come forward and said that this is potentially life-threatening?
That I am unsure how to bear together. I can only tell you what I know about him, which is he did the reauthorization. He's intimately familiar with the code for NASA and NOAA. And so the only thing I can figure from talking to him is he doesn't think that the cuts made during the spring are going to slow down critical functions, and that puts him at odds with those meteorologists.
Wait a minute, maybe we're talking about two different things, because if he is analyzing cuts that occurred in the spring, and we're talking about cuts that occurred today, is it possible that to which you're referring and to which I am referring are two different things, or?
It's possible. I'll grant you that, like, this is a little confusing for me. It being cuts and pulling back money, not bills. So it could be I was more trying to use your timeline than anything else, but his analysis does put it on for meteorologists.
Yeah, I think there were cuts to NOAA that we've actually discussed before, and I think maybe the confusion is that you're referring to that because this is something that is happening today.
Gary, I think that's what it is. Thank you for correcting the confusion.
Well, if you hadn't brought it up, other people who might be confused wouldn't know either. What about the food banks?
I don't think cutting food bank money is good policy. Granted, townships and states are best to take care of their own folks, but where the township can't keep up, in particular places like New York City or, say, like Houston or Dallas in Texas, those folks probably need federal funding. So that, I would argue, is not a good policy. But I will admit to being more confused about the NOAA and NASA than I think I actually have firmness on. But no, cutting food banks does not seem like a good policy to me.
I would hope that somebody might somewhere along the line give an explanation of why they're doing these things. But at any rate, thank you, Marshall.
Hey everybody, it's nice to see everybody. Could somebody kick John from the stage by now? I don't know if somebody did that, but
I doubt it. I don't think anybody gets kicked from the stage.
I got him at a back channel. He was curious.
He hasn't put his hand back up and rolled by it.
I think he got, I don't know. I think he got kicked from the room or something. I don't know. Alright, well, this is neither here nor there. Gary, I plead on the satellite data. I mean, to some degree, I'm woefully ignorant, right? I have to trust experts, and so I'm way out of my depth. But in general, I mean, I think there's certain things the federal government does that it does because states can't do them, right? We're probably better off with a federal tracking system for things that keep track of weather patterns rather than 50 state system. You know, I mean, obviously. So, this is alarming if the experts that are complaining are right. I mean, that seems that we're endangering people, and I think in general, call me radical, but I think that's not a great policy to keep people less elite in time for severe weather patterns and things like that. I mean, that just sounds really bad. But again, I mean, the government has answers for that, and I don't have enough information litigated out, but I mean, it sounds like something for concern. With regard to food banks, I mean, I think on some level I can see more of a philosophical argument for that, right? I think, look, the conservative argument tends to be churches, right, by religious nonprofits and things like this, by private sector charities and things like that. Now, regarding churches, the average congregation is about 87 members, and it's not very fiscally, they're not rolling in dough to do all this stuff, right? So, I mean, and then states, right, are often have, sort of bunch of the fact. I mean, I was just reading something from Time that was, and this is, not the first article like this I've seen where the data is basically largely the blue states subsidize the red states, right? So, I mean, the blue states tend to pay much more into the federal government than they get back. And so it's just interesting, right? The conservatives, the red states who often are saying, hey, government's not a great thing, government is, big government's a big problem. They are happy taking subsidies that come from these godless, liberal blue states. So, I think that philosophically, though, I mean, you could argue that the federal government shouldn't be providing food for people, right? And that this is just something the federal government shouldn't do. I mean, you could make an argument, I suppose, if you're a small government conservative, that this was nowhere in the vision of the founders, or that we have a federal government that was doing food distribution. I mean, I would argue that times change, and sometimes we're 50 states, and sometimes we're one big collective agent, and sometimes we need the collective agent to actually come to the aid of folks in the various localities and particularities that need basic things like food. I'm with Marshall. I think in general, pragmatically, I just think it's a bad idea to cut food. It's very good money.
Fake Republican Marshall
very practical, right? You're actually delivering something that people need tangibly. I think it's a good thing.
Spoken out about the hurricane forecast.
Kitover is such a fake Republican Marshall right
Several AP articles.
here.
I want to source 3 quotes very quickly. These are all Associated Press interviews. Mark Alessi, who is Science Fellow at the Union of Concerned Scientists, quoted by the Associated Press. If a hurricane is a day away from making landfall, it's nighttime. We will no longer be able to say this storm is definitely undergoing rapid intensification. Like the already hurricane specialists, other record data will be available only half as much, which was severely impeded to read hurricane forecasts affecting tens of millions of Americans. And the third example is Ryan McNulty, quoted by the Associated Press, University of Miami hurricane researcher. Microwave data are all relevant. I don't know why I can't read today. Microwave data are already relatively sparse, but to abruptly add 3 active functioning satellites is insanity. That may be sensationalism, but in fairness, it's sensationalism promulgated by the experts. Why they always accuse the news media for doing its job when the news media reports things people don't want reported is something I've, in all these years as being a reporter, I've never understood. Steve.
Yeah, Gary, let me get to the food bank thing first. As a general principle, I think that you're always going to have a segment of society that's going to be in need. I think you need to have some kind of way to take edge off that if someone gets in a situation that they just can't feed themselves. But now, I'll preface that with this caveat. You can overlook a system like that without
things like we've seen Marshall's state being completely overrun. That type of blow into the country can add a strain to those type of systems that it's never intended to withstand. So I think it's got to be two-pronged. You take care of you take care of the people that's in need. You do what you can to facilitate and make sure no one in this country is starving. But then again, you have to have some kind of flow on the control the flow on the demand side of this. You can't inject a large demand with a budget that wasn't intended to do that. For the satellite thing, it's my understanding that, like you referenced that one article, when it gets within a day of this short, that by that time, ground-based radar and start picking up the
hurricane hunters can fly.
Right, so you're not blind. I think that's a little hyperbole.
But when they're too far offshore, they can't.
That's
fly.
not a day, Derek. That's not a day out, like the guy was trying to say. If you're one day out off the coast, ground-based radar and hurricane hunters can reach that. You're talking more deep in the ocean. And, as someone that lived in a state in proximity to the coast for a number of years and went through quite a few hurricanes, let me tell you, as someone that's been through numerous hurricanes, I don't care if it's 120 mile an hour, 140 mile an hour wind. I'm going to get myself prepared. So, are we talking about the exact number on how many millibars of pressure drop we got? Or are we talking about wind speed? But for someone that's actually lived in a place that was prone to hurricanes, listen, I don't care if it's a Cat 2, Cat 3, and we had one come in on us that was Cat 4. If you live in that area, you don't have to do it. It's not going to change your preparation for someone to say, oh my God, you got a Cat 4 instead of a Cat 3. I mean, you're going to be doing the same things because the effects, even though there's going to be varying degrees of intensity, the preparation and effects are going to be very similar. So I think we may be talking about a nuance here, and maybe if you want to be able to get the exact millibar drop, or you want to get the eyeball strength or the intensity, those things could be at play. But people who live in those areas, when they see that stuff coming in on them, if you live there any time at all, you know what you got to do. So I'll leave it there.
By the way, you might have missed this when I read it. So he didn't say a day away. He said a day away from making landfall, and it's nighttime. So,
I don't think nighttime would affect ground-based radar.
It's not the ground-based radar that they use primarily. It's the hurricane hunters who cannot fly into the eye of the storm.
But it's my understanding when you get in that, if you're a day away and you say you got a storm, I think ground-based radar a day away could reach in and give you sufficient data to tell you whether you got a Cat 3 or Cat 4. But again, if anyone that's ever lived where you get a lot of hurricanes, and it's like 70 miles off the coast, so we got a little cushion from the land, but we got plenty of them. Regardless of whether you're Cat 3 or Cat 4, you're going to be preparing the same way. People that know will be preparing the same way.
I would say not. And I'll give you the best example that I know, and I live at the coast, and I also have probably lived through, I don't know, 8, 9, 10 hurricanes, because I was one of those idiots who got sent into the path of the hurricane to report on as a national correspondent. So I was there before the hurricane arrived, and I was on the radio telling people they should be evacuated. I was, I never had a problem finding a place to stay because everybody else was leaving. managed to get through obviously all of them okay. But if you look at Katrina, which I covered, that was a massive freaking hurricane. Massive. And we know the amount of damage that Katrina created. And we knew it was a massive hurricane long before it arrived. Like at least a week, maybe more. And it gave everybody the opportunity, whether they availed themselves of the opportunity or not, because we know that FEMA ended up dropping the ball, to not only evacuate if they had the ability to do so, which folks that didn't have the ability to do so, the local government didn't provide them that ability. They could have. But the point was, they were given advance warning long before the hurricane made landfall, and they could have, should have, would have taken the proper precautions. And I'm not just talking about individuals. I'm talking about utilities. I'm talking about people who could help with evacuations. I'm talking about pre-positioning emergency response after the hurricane arrives. They knew how many, they should have known. They dropped the ball, but because of that,
our family are not food insecure, and Womack, he put an excellent point in the chat. Like, I may not drive a lot, but you may need to drive a lot. I'm paying taxes for the roads.
State and federal dropped the ball on that. The various, mainly church-based, but not all church-based, the Red Cross was there as well, for example. But all of these disaster relief programs, they had all their people in place in advance. And I remember being there for Katrina, seeing the Baptists roll in, the Salvation Army roll in, the Red Cross roll in, and I'm thinking, where the hell is FEMA? Where the hell is FEMA? But the point is, Steve, they all had that advance information, so they knew to gear up. People knew to give their bosses notice. Hey, I got to take time off to go down there and volunteer on this hurricane that's coming in. It's mad, and everybody looked at the TV and they saw that it was huge. I think the ability to pre-warn with that kind of specificity, based on the interviews that I have heard with the meteorologists, is going to be diminished tremendously. And how? And what are we saving by not analyzing the data? What's the gain by doing that, Steve?
Well, I'll just say this in relation to what you're talking about there. One of the things I was always acutely aware of during hurricane season in the area that I lived in, of course there's some flooding areas, was the topography around me. I mean, that's just common sense. And the people in New Orleans, knowing that they're sitting there below sea level, knowing that you got a Cat 4, I think it was Cat 4 coming down on you. People like that didn't evacuate, I don't know what to tell them, because that's just crazy, man. And if you're in that type of situation, and like I say, topography is important when because you get massive amounts of rain off hurricanes. If you don't have some acumen into what your topography is and have some awareness of that as an individual, shame on you, because you're not doing your job as someone trying to look out for your family, and you should take precautions. I didn't need, we had I forget which one it was. I think it was in 87, 88. I can't remember this. So many came in when I lived in southern North Carolina. I lose track of it. But, when you see these things, you start thinking, okay, where am I at? What's the chance of flooding? What do I need? What do I need to have a plan? I didn't rely on the government here. I mean, I know they can be some assistance, but I think think if you're not acutely aware of these things, you do a disservice to yourself. You think government's going to save you in that situation? Hold on, because you may be in trouble.
There's a really good joke Ron White tells about hurricanes. He's a comedian. And it goes, people stay behind during hurricanes. And he goes, there's this guy on South Beach who said that he did 1,000 sit-ups so he was prepared for the hurricane. Well, brother, it's not that the wind is a-blowing, it's what the wind is a-blowing. And if you get hit by a Volvo in your spleen, it doesn't matter how many sit-ups you did that day. I hope that adds a little levity. I took the jury fine.
So here's the thing about New Orleans. It was actually a Category 5 over the Gulf of Mexico. It was a
I can't remember which one it was.
Yeah, it was a Category 3 when it made landfall. And this was a water event more than it was a wind event in New Orleans. It was a wind event too, but it was the flooding that caused the most death and destruction.
Yeah, but here you are.
In the ninth ward of New Orleans, which was the hardest hit ward, it's a 34% poverty level in the ninth ward. Point being, the people, I spent time on the Gulf Coast of Mississippi. People on the Gulf Coast of Mississippi, by and large, although there are poor folks there too, had the means to get out of Dodge. There were a lot of people in New Orleans that did not have the means to get out of Dodge. They didn't have transportation. They didn't have money to purchase transportation. I recall seeing a yard full of school buses.
No, that's the exact same thing, Gary.
And they were flooded out. The school buses were flooded out because, well, nobody thought to evacuate the damn school buses. You could have taken those school buses and used those school buses to evacuate people to higher ground and save the school buses. Two wins with one shot. But they didn't.
But you know something, Gary? You know who primarily was responsible for the safety of their citizens there? It was the governor and the mayor.
I said the local state and federal level. I said all three failed. But I was there and I know where the failings were. And I know on all three levels there was failure. And I know on all three levels they were pointing at the other two. I was there, I covered it, I remember all that. But the point is not how Katrina was responded to by government. The point was they had the information in hand that they should have responded in a better way than they did. Whether it's the fault of the governor or the mayor or Michael Brown who headed FEMA, it doesn't really matter. They all dropped the ball. But the next time we have a Katrina, and if the degree of the data is such that they cannot predict with the kind of accuracy they did the intensity of the storm, well, we won't be able to blame them for not doing their job because they didn't have the information at hand. So it's great for them. They don't have to do their.
No, I'd say this. I'd say that conventional radar will give you an indication of how severe something's going to be as far as the wind speed. I think you're talking about very minute details within the forecasting and the bigger picture of what's coming at you. You know, if you get a Cat 3 or you get a Cat 4, you know you're going to get a lot of rain off this thing. You always do off hurricanes, and you know you're in a low-lying area. Topography-wise, I mean, you don't need precision there. You just need a little common sense. Hey, it's time to get out of a place that's going to turn into a pond, and call it good. But I'll leave it there.
All right, so just a few comments. One, Marshall, I love hearing about your brother, but
Probably shouldn't rush so much.
No, it's fine. I'm just saying, like, I think we might be overreading, how much to kind of buy into what a congressional staffer thinks. Because I understand it's your brother, but congressional staffers, as somebody who's dealt with some congressional staffers, they typically have huge portfolios, and they don't really understand the workings of the executive. I mean, they're typically kids out of college with their campaign staff, whatever. So I would just kind of, think that just to kind of think about it.
That makes sense.
Yeah. As far as this data, New York Times does some really interesting reporting on cuts in NHA or essentially health studies. And what they essentially came to is they kind of looked at all the grants and studies they were cutting at universities, and they figured out that they're kind of doing a control find and looking for words that they don't like. Diversity. They cut a bunch of grants out of a pool of money where the researcher was, just disabled or whatever in studying, whatever. It's haphazard. They cut science. It's very bad. My thesis on this hurricane data is it's essentially the same thing. There's somewhere where the satellite's going to collect climate data, it's going to track it over time, and that's super bad for this administration. And that's why they did, what Marshall was talking about, the big beautiful bill, that's budgeting. This is essentially OMB cutting the rug on this data collection. This is why. Steve talked a lot about how you don't need a lot of data and you don't need all this nuance and all this stuff to save lives. That's all that you can do. If you go back to the 1900 breakouts of the hurricane, they killed around 12,000 people. Why did they kill around 12,000 people? Because nobody knew what was coming. And it just hit them out of the blue. We have made great strides in hurricane prevention, and it actually does matter a lot how accurate those paths are, because as somebody who's also lived in a hurricane area, you kind of get fatigued from evacuating. And people stop evacuating. Every time a hurricane comes up, you tell them the world's going to hit, it's going to hit you directly. The more accurate these paths are, the more data you can share with people exactly who's in danger and exactly who should evacuate. And as far as a life-saving measure, we don't know the bounty that the modern world has given. We are in a world in which we have it so good, but we're tearing down. We're essentially tearing down what has given us that life-saving data, and it's a shame. And all because, and my thesis would be, they're going to dare collect some data that might support that the global climate is changing. I think it's short-sighted, but I think it's got down.
By the way, nobody is, as far as I can tell, has argued that, or probably estimated how much the government expects to save by shutting off the processing of the microwave sensors. I can cite how much is saved as a result of NOAA forecasting, which is not just the microwave sensors that are no longer going to be analyzed, but overall. I'm looking at a news article that cites a 2024 American Meteorological Society study that estimates that for every $1 invested in NOAA forecasts, $73 are saved. And I see another analysis here that says that advancements in predicting wind speeds, which rely on data that includes microwave observations, not exclusively, have generated about $5 billion in savings per hurricane. Now, I'm just reading the top of this analysis. I'm not going to get into the details of it because it's just, I don't have time to read it. You don't want to hear me read it. But just suffice to say, there are great savings to be made to insurance payoffs potentially, to lives potentially. I don't see a justification for doing this. I don't see how we're saving any money by doing this.
Well, just to add to that, this sort of science subsidized this sort of lifestyle people all come to expect on the coast. This, along with federal flood insurance, is why you can have build up areas in Florida and don't, have takeouts in Texas every few years. And to just kind of rip it down and say the nuances don't matter, it doesn't matter that the meteorologist can tell you if a storm's going to hit Tampa or going to hit the Panhandle. That stuff matters a great deal in getting people out of danger. The accuracy of those tracks, the accuracy of those wind speeds. Cities like Tampa know when to evacuate and how to evacuate and how much to evacuate. And it's just the height of stupidity to just tear this down because of a big boogeyman that I suspect is climate change.
Well, that may or may not be the motivation for it. That's an interesting proposition. Thank you, Brent. Alan, you're up.
Good. How are you this evening, Gary?
I'm good. Sorry I didn't give you a heads up, but
That's okay.
You already noticed it, so.
So the two, I'm going to answer your question, and I have two small points of order, if you will indulge me. First of all, the answer on the weather thing is absolutely terrible public policy. I can't agree with Steve. I think if the government doesn't do it, who else is going to do it? There's no excuse. It's just plain dumb. And it may well be about global warming, but whether it is or isn't, I'm with you. I see no justification. Now, I'm in California. We have earthquakes. If we were talking about predicting earthquakes, I could imagine an argument that says we don't currently have that facility. Why should we invest in it? But since this is already here, why are we taking it away? It makes absolutely no sense. Now, I am going to, so I disagree with Steve on that one, but I am going to agree with Steve. And some who think of me as a progressive may be surprised, but I actually think there is a justification to the food bank reduction, and Scott covered it a little bit. We want to talk about what good people we are, and Biden used to say we are great because we're good. Well, Anson often says, and I think with great justification, that the government can only do what people are willing to pay for it to do. These people on the right, particularly religious people, want to be all gung-ho about abortion, and yet they don't want to take responsibility for the life that's created. And I would say this is the same thing, that maybe it does make sense for government to say there is a limit to what we can provide in terms of food, and we are going to leave this to the religious communities and see if we really are good. Let's throw that challenge open. And to some extreme, I really blame George W. for this problem, because his idea of compassionate conservatism was really taking a charter away from something that had been typically in religious communities. Now, I do want to mention that my brain trust this evening at 7 p.m. Eastern is going to talk about the Great Divide. We are recording this room, Gary, and I would love to know from you why, Scott had a terrific thing on St. Augustine the other day, and I was frustrated that I couldn't go back and listen to it.
Why have you chosen not to record? Well, it's for personal reasons that I don't really want to get into right now. But okay, I'll tell you on a phone call if you're getting.
I'd love to know, and yes, I'd love to. So yes, let's do that sometime.
So it's interesting when you said this. You made this comment about the philosophy of the government ought not to do it, but the churches will do it. But the churches apparently don't step up enough. Some of them do, but not enough, and they can't do it on their own apparently. And the food banks are like the churches, I guess, right? And well, they means nothing, but let me just give you an example of a fellow I know who absolutely believed exactly what you articulated. This is not the job of government. This is the job of the churches. That's how it used to be before, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, and that's how it should be today. This is stupid. I don't want my tax dollars being used to help people who are too lazy to go out and get a job. That was his philosophy. I'm not saying it's yours. I'm saying that was his. That was all well and good until the guy who ran his own little business and he became ill and he fell onto hard times and no longer could provide for himself. Guess where he went to for help? He's in subsidized housing.
Yep.
And they deliver him his food. All of the things that he railed against when he was making money, and by the way, he was making a lot of money at one time. There was an overhead to his business, so a lot that went in went back out, but he was bringing in a lot of revenue at one time. And then things went sour in his business, and then his health got bad. And it wasn't for lack of fortitude on his part. It was not for a lack of him not having those strong Protestant Christian values of rolling up your sleeves and working, tilling the fields from dawn to dusk. He was of that ilk, and he had such strong disdain. I remember pulling up to a food cart with him. I was in his car. And he says, "Hey, this is a great food cart." Yeah. So he pulled up, and there was a guy outside the food cart begging for money. And he looked at me and says, "Get a job, Pops." Well, guess what? He's now that guy. So you got to have a safety net, I think, because not everybody's going to be able to get out of Dodge when the hurricane comes, or be able to grow food in their backyard if they even have a backyard, and and can it and save it for the winter and all that kind of stuff. We're not that kind of a society any longer.
Yeah,
and people don't have those skills,
But Gary, I want to push back on that for a second. This food and medicine are different than education. Education is about the future. It's about how our children are going to have a society tomorrow. But medicine and food, when do you stop? When do you say there's enough quality? And there's this conflation between what is individual responsibility and what is government responsibility. And so I'm not necessarily believing exactly what I'm saying. I'm not this cruel, but I'm saying if Anson is right, that it's more important to have guns than butter. Let's just put it that way for a brief thing. Maybe the thing that Donald Trump has done for us is forced us not to take such things for granted, and maybe people need to, in the short run, experience a little bit of seeing people starving and so forth before they recognize the great things we have.
Wow, interesting. And by the way, we're at 5:55, so we won't add anybody to the stage, but everybody on the stage will get an opportunity to speak.
Hey, Harry, happy Monday. I don't have a lot to add. I did want to maybe just say I did put some information in the chat on the food banks and specifically the largest
food bank network in the United States. It's called Feeding America. I put some information in there. It has raised about $4.9 billion. Has a 4-star charity rating for 10 years in a row. On its board of directors are, I think, the vice chairman of Walmart, vice chairman of Morgan Stanley, Fortune 100 type people, all supporting food safety here in the United States. Feeding America takes $0 from the federal government. It's 100% privately funded. And it does partner with SNAP and other USDA programs. So I just wanted to put a word out there in support of the kind of work that is being done, Gary. Long Island, where I live, has a food bank established in 1980 by former singer Harry Chapin. I don't know if you remember him, Gary. Of course. Okay, so Harry started the food bank. And I have been lucky enough to have founded a food pantry, which is aligned with the food bank. They provide us with distributed food. All of these organizations are privately funded.
All has a U to which you refer.
To which I refer and I know of, which includes other communities on Long Island and whatnot, food pantries. Run in my case, local citizens who volunteer, sit on the board of directors, that hand out bags of food on every Tuesday afternoon. And do that kind of work. Do that kind of community work. So I just want to put a word out there for those guys who do that kind of work all across the country, who are privately funded and have been doing so, well, let's say 1980. That would be like 45 years. A long time. So there's a lot of work that's being done. The government, USDA, and SNAP or programs that the federal government runs. But this other work is equally important. And I want to make on that.
Thank you, Dominic. So when I was in Detroit, I participated as a front in the Meals on Wheels program, delivering food to shut-in seniors in Detroit. And I never thought about who funded it. So as you were talking, I looked it up. So that particular program receives about 35% of its funding from the Federal Older Americans and Nutrition Program that's administered through the state. But it goes from the federal government to the state and then down to the Meals on Wheels program, and then the meals get loaded up into my car and I deliver it to the old folks' homes when I was there. So I have no idea whether this spring, I've not been in touch with those folks in decades. I don't even know who those folks are now running these programs today. But it would be instructive to me to find out whether their ability to service the senior community in Detroit has been diminished by the spring cut. I mean, this is the thing. It's always the damnation is in the details. So now we're getting into the nitty-gritty of things. And
I would just make the motion.
I would just to complete my point first, Dominic.
I would be very upset based on my personal bias history because of my alliance with that program. If I heard that, of course, those folks that I was delivering meals to are no longer around, but the ones who are now, who were younger then, obviously, I would be very upset if I learned that the Detroit Meals on Wheels program, to which I was a part, was no longer able to feed as many senior citizens as it did then. I can't see how anybody could say that those people could fend for themselves, nor that we should turn our backs on them. But go ahead,
I was just kind of making this distinction between prepared meals, which is what you were talking about, which is completely distinct from food banks and food pantries. So I just
You're talking about Meals on Wheels, right?
the devil's in the details.
I am, yes.
No, I just want to make sure it's correct.
You're welcome. I'm gonna check further to see whether the program that funds Detroit, the Older Americans and nutrition program was cut to. So, like I said, being in the nitty-gritty agent here.
Sorry about that. How are you, Gary? It's good to be here.
Well, now that I'm able to put a complete sentence together without stumbling, I'm doing fine. A little earlier, not so good.
It's good to be with you. I'm not an expert on these cuts that are happening, but I'll tell you my insight. The food bank thing, I don't know enough about it. I volunteered at some food banks. I'm not quite sure how important the federal funding for food, I mean, that seems pretty high level. And, you know, I know they talk about food deserts and so forth, and I think there's a big problem with the nutrition, and I know Robert Kennedy's trying to address, you know, us not poisoning ourselves with sugar and chemicals and hormones and all kinds of things, but, you know, I don't have, no one's dying for lack of calories at the moment in the United States. But on this hurricane data thing is interesting. I saw a headline the other day about AI being used to do weather prediction now. And this is, I think, being pioneered by some of the big tech companies. And if we're talking about cuts to federal funding for infrastructure or analyses or personnel or so forth to do with weather, data gathering and analysis, I have to wonder for a second. It's like, how many satellites in near Earth orbit now do we have? I think it's in the tens of thousands, maybe, or it's at least in the thousands that, for instance, just SpaceX has in orbit. Amazon has a new program. They almost hired me for putting the same types of satellites in orbit. Lots of other companies are running satellites. So my point is, I think early days when the cost of capital, the cost of and the profit, and when there's a clear public good argument for some programs, it makes sense for the federal government to be, you know, the provider to make these like tens or hundreds of billions of dollars in investment to get a new technology off the ground, and to provide that public good to everyone. But I think once the cost gets low enough that it almost just falls out. I mean, in a sense, weather data is almost just like an artifact of some of the other data that I know all these tens of thousands of satellites are already gathering. And all you have to do is connect that data, which a lot of the big companies, the tech companies are doing on their own anyway, because they have profit motive to know about, you know, for their own machinations, to be able to predict the future, to be able to predict the weather, and therefore to maximize their own profits. My point is, I think we're well past the era that we need to rely on the federal government to gather and analyze this data, and actually private players are doing it,
in a much more sophisticated way already, and in many cases just giving it away to us for free. It's like nothing for them. And so, like, the path of the hurricane, I mean, we're not in the 1940s anymore. We're in the 2020s, and we have the technology that's practically ubiquitous is so much more powerful. And I, therefore, am skeptical of bureaucracies that may have been created in the 1940s to solve these types of problems, and whether or not they're actually providing the maximum value to the taxpayer in 2025, and certainly in 2030. I'll be very surprised if we still need them for this specific thing. There are other things you can make arguments for, but I'm not too worried that I won't know when the hurricane's going to hit or something like this. I think we've got that solved in a much more sophisticated way than we ever did.
Again, I question that why are all these meteorologists and scientists arguing otherwise, but the answer to your question is 19,000.
But do they have a financial incentive to say that?
What is financial incentive?
If they're a meteorologist who's getting, one way or another, getting federal money into their pockets.
That's not exactly that. Don't get me wrong. As I said, my brother's not too concerned about that. He's from his vantage point. But it does serve an important purpose. And having to get it from a private source. I mean, number one, they don't have the exact same resources at their disposal. But number two, it's going to have a subscription fee. NOAA has no subscription fee, and keeping NOAA as the Oceanographic and Atmospheric Service is good for us. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying you can't, Jackson, right now. I'm not saying you can't make collecting government programs. I am saying I don't think the idea of simplifying it down to let's just do it private is a very good idea. The private sector is not going to share that stuff unless there's some sort of a profit motive, and you need weather data for the military that doesn't have anything to do with profit motive. Granted, they have their own weather service, but they do use NOAA as one to take off of. So, I understand where you're coming from. The Department of the National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Service does do invaluable work for the U.S. government and saves us a lot of money in subscriptions every year.
Thank you, Marshall. Thank you, agents. 19,000, 11,400 of them are still active. The other 7,000 plus are space junk. But 19,000, I don't know. At a certain point, that's a problem as well. They have to, when they do space launches, I think they have to take all that into consideration now. David.
You should Google the word Kessler syndrome.
Okay. I'm interested in that. David.
Yeah, great discussion. I think the title is another title that really doesn't really need to be answered in a way that I think it's obvious that this isn't good policy. Considering the level of global warming that's going on, climate change, the impact on lives, property, the ability of the American people to respond, making decisions based upon how soon we evacuate, how much damage is going to happen. I think there's a whole host of things that the government provides that can be monetized on behalf of the taxpayer. And just basic good safety policy. We talked in the room about the FAA, the air traffic controllers. I mean, it's just good policy to have seasoned, experienced people manning the ship, manning the air flights, without any downtime, without any question, without any private sector gap filling that may not have the same incentive to do the job that the seasoned professionals, government workers have. The food bank issue, to me, I mean, we're talking about the dance between church and government and the private sector. What
Well, there's one religion that I know of that's done a phenomenal job of backstopping these kinds of things, and that's the Latter-day Saints, based out of Salt Lake City, Utah, also known as the Mormons. They have a massive network of bishop storehouses, farm to table, farm to warehouse. They've got reserves. When Katrina happened, they deployed hundreds of volunteers in food and whatnot to the sites faster than I think FEMA was providing it at the time. If we recall the confusion and all the stuff that was happening there with regard to delivery, we had George W. telling Brown he was doing a great job when he really wasn't. But the Mormons learned from the Great Depression, and they've also learned from a history of being outcasted by the United States government, which forced them in the state of Utah. But they also teach a level of self-reliance in the bishop storehouses, which is what they're called. When people go there for food, they put a program in place to get people back to work. They figure out what their budgets are, if there's elderly involved, they make sure they're fed. But this is an organization, Gary, that doesn't want to leave anything to chance, whereby they're at the beck and call of the United States government to serve their members' needs and their members' families' needs. So, again, I'm not doing a plug for them, and I'm not trying to promote their religion at all, but they have been exemplary in their history of how they see the most beneficial aspects of taking care of their congregation. And of course, if all hell in a handbags that breaks loose, the other thing they used to teach was that every member should have a year's supply of storage in their houses and their basements to be ready for any situation that could happen where you may not be able to feed your family. So I think there's a level of self-reliance there that I think the nation can learn from. But that being said, there's still a massive amount of poverty in this country. Housing insecurity, food insecurity. It breaks my heart to see our government debate, whether or not children should receive school lunches and vouchers. Where we have the restaurant industry, the food industry, restaurant industry throwing away billions of dollars of food every year because they have to, because of state and local laws regarding perishable items. So there's a whole host of waste there that I think we could capture somehow and be less wasteful on that front. And then, of course, with regard to the folks that guard food, the farm workers, the great state of California, right, where half of all farm workers, or close to it, are undocumented. We're now running into the insecurity of not being able to get this food picked in a timely manner before it rots and spoils in the orchards and the vines and the ground and so forth. So how much is that going to cost the nation? So
you're saying in the aggregate, the food insecurity problem is now being compounded?
That's my argument, absolutely. I would say that very accurately. It's going to be compounded. Not just compounded, but also higher prices being raised. So a family of four going to the grocery store, does the mother cut back on fresh produce that might be going up in cost because it's too expensive in lieu of something more processed and all that? So there's also the health of the nation that could be impacted by these rising costs in terms of feeding your family with the best possible produce out there, food out there. And then, of course, I think if you can feed people and keep them fed, you're going to cut down on medical costs because their health isn't going to decline. Right? If you got to go out and eat fast food at $5-10 a pop just to not starve, less the worst food on the planet you can put inside your body. So what does that do to the health of the nation and its workforce and whatnot? So, those are my thoughts here on that front. So yeah, no, we should not get rid of that. Yeah.
Thank you, David Lesson.
So I learned a lot by listening to folks before me. And some of what I'm going to say has been said before. Very important is, in terms of hurricanes, is the ratio of false reports, telling people to go evacuate versus correctly versus not correctly. And the more you get it, right, the more people listen to you. It's the same way with anything, right? If I give you advice and it turns out to be good, people are gonna listen to me. Versus if I am wrong too much of the time, calling fire when there isn't really one. And that's where data comes in. And we need to be able to improve knowing where this thing's gonna land. And we have the computer power now to do that. But we also need perhaps better data to go into our model where we can predict better who should be evacuating and who should not.
So I've always said let's have it covered. Like I said, 8, 9, 10 hurricanes. I guess I have to go back and try to remember them all, but a lot of hurricanes. I've come to the conclusion, and obviously this is not something to be taken literal, that hurricanes have a mind of their own. So you can predict landfall is going to be at a certain location. And then it's like the hurricane's listening to these news reports and saying, well, I'm going to fool you. And then at the last second, banks into a different direction and makes landfall elsewhere. And so it's really kind of inexact. So I think actually, your point is we need more data, not less. And I think that what I just explained lends credibility to your.
Well, yes, and weather used to be more capricious, and then we had better modeling of the weather, and now I am just shocked. I can get the hour by hour prediction of what the weather's going to be, and I can have a 10-day forecast that is accurate. And the technology can help there. In terms of the food banks, I would like to, I should say one more thing about hurricanes. And that is, I recall Brian Williams became famous for his coverage of Katrina, but it was all very, how horrible the people there were. He was in this, the population was acting like savages or something like, he was in this, what was it, this,
Superdome?
No, thank you. And his reporting there, when you look back on it, was terrible.
Well, I can't comment on his reporting because I was down there and I had no access to television. I was sleeping on the tarmac of Louis Armstrong Airport. I had no idea what my colleagues were reporting, but it was a bad situation.
Right, it was a bad situation, but wasn't because people were, just going into the law of the jungle, which is the kind of stuff he was putting.
I think some of that did happen. I think there was very little security, no policing. There were a lot of New Orleans cops who did not report for duty. They evacuated. So there was a shortage of cops. It was really an extremely chaotic situation. I can't even begin to describe to you how chaotic it was in both the Gulf Coast of Mississippi, where I was, and in New Orleans, which I was there for 3 weeks. So I'm very familiar with the. There were no landmarks in some cases. No street signs. It was unbelievable.
And he was just reporting on speculations that turned out not to be true.
I'll have to tell you that because I did not hear that information was inaccurate, but it might have been. But go ahead on the food bank.
And I'd just like to say, in terms of the food bank, out here, I think a lot of places, a place called the Second Harvest, and it's the idea of gleaning. You have food that, they take off the shelves for one reason or another. You still good, but maybe there's too much of this for the demand or whatever. And also the government used to subsidize the prices of some commodity, and then that food was distributed through these food banks as well. And the companies do it because they're nice, but some folks also do it, and this is not bad, but there are, the government subsidizes it by having tax write-off. So it is costing taxpayers in the sense that somebody's got to make it goes and it either increases the deficit, so either you got to pay more taxes now to make up for it, or your children will have to pay it in the future. And it's not a bad system, but I'm just saying that we are, the government is paying for it in the sense that these companies aren't paying what they would normally pay for all the government services. They don't have to pay the same tax rate that they were paying. Would agree without the write-off.
So Les, I'm looking right now with regard to the Superdome, and it's really ironic because, as I said, I was there, but I was never in the Superdome. So I was unaware of whether the reporting was accurate or inaccurate. You're absolutely right that it was inaccurate. It's all been debunked subsequently. There were two investigations. One by the New York Times and a review by the LA Times that found that the more sensational claims were unfounded. There were no sexual assaults, but sexual assaults were reported. There were no gun battles, but gun battles were reported. There were no multiple homicides. In fact, only one verified death. That guy committed suicide by jumping from an upper level. There were problems there. A lot of problems. It was overcrowded. There were 30,000 people there. The heating system went down. The medical supplies were limited, and the number of people there to help the people were limited. But this exaggeration of how people were treating one another while huddled in the Superdome, and I did not know until today that was untrue. So I appreciate you bringing that to my attention. That's really extremely important.
Yeah, so I was surprised too. And as you know, Brian Williams was disgraced for making crap up for a different story.
Right, he was on a military airplane that flew into enemy fire or something like that.
Right. And
I've never understood why a guy who reaches that stature. I mean, I've never understood the exaggeration by reporters to put themselves, make them, this is why you're not supposed to be part of it. You're not supposed to be the story. You're supposed to be reporting the story. You're not supposed to be the story. And it's not about you. Even if that plane came under fire, it's not about you being so brave as to have gone through that. The story is that this is what our military has to endure. And it's not about Brian Williams. At any rate, I know some people do that. We're all human, and you're going to have frailties among journalists as well. But once you reach a certain stature, why would you do that unless you've been doing it all along and it becomes just second nature to you to do it? That's absolutely stupid what he did. But he's not the only one. I mean, we know that Hillary Clinton lied about her and her daughter coming under fire on the tarmac of a military base once and stuff like that. And Joe Biden embellished a little minor fire in his house in Delaware. And these embellishments erode public confidence in journalism journalism and in government. It's, and by the way, not all of the misrepresentation of what occurred in New Orleans came from the minds of the journalists. A lot of that was, it came from the mouths of the New Orleans officials into the ears of the journalists. So there's that.
Well, I want to tell you, you asked, why did Brian Williams do this starting when he was, big guy? As we just saw, that's how he became a big guy. He made up sensational stories that got him on the air. And also, he looked like an anchor.
Right, yeah, I know this typecast very well. Look, I know a guy, I'm not going to say his name, he's still in the business, but he did a story where a guy, he was reporting, and by the way, it's accurate that this was happening in Detroit at the time, that people in public would be shooting up during the heroin craze. I've seen it myself, driving down the street. I've seen people on street corners shooting up in public view. They're so whacked out, they don't care where they are while they're shooting up. I've actually recently seen it, meaning in the last, 4 or 5 years, somebody had his works out and was shooting up in a subway station in Midtown Manhattan. It happens. But what this guy did, he ended up paying these guys to shoot up on camera for him. He paid them. He paid them to shoot up on camera. And when the story came out, I think he even won an award for going into the gang-infested neighborhood of Detroit and bravely, with his crew, capturing this. And then it came out that he had paid and he got discredited. But guess what? He didn't lose his job. And in fact, he went on to bigger and better things. I would never hire a guy like that. Never. Well, you're done, as far as I'm concerned, for doing that. So I know it happens. And it shouldn't happen, but it does on occasion. I was unaware of Brian Williams reporting at all. I mean, I was there, and he was there, but I'm sure he was unaware of my reporting as well. Thank you, Les. Brian, and then Pam gets the last word. Brian.
Hey, Gary. The bottom line, I think both of them are necessary programs. And here's what convinced me. First of all, what everybody, I think, so far from what I heard is getting wrong about the weather information, and I think you did touch on it, is it's microwave information. And this microwave information is the same kind of microwave that we have in our microwave ovens. And they can't just get this anywhere. This is coming from the Department of Defense. And what this does is it measures the water in these storms. So, when you were talking about, I forgot what they were called, surprise morning storms or something you were mentioning, that detects the amount of water and whether that storm is going to blow up, whether it's, it might come in a certain category and then blow up to a higher, it measures, basically it just measures the water in the storms, and that type of information is unique that they were getting it from the Department of Defense. The articles I read didn't mention any other alternatives to that. I mean, there may be out there. I don't know of them if there is, but it led me to believe that information they were getting from the Department of Defense was unique. And the Trump administration is citing cybersecurity reasons for not giving it out to the NOA anymore, and also budget and layoffs. The food bank, at first I was like, there's all kinds of food banks. There's food stamps, I don't know, not sure what the big deal is on that, but I did some reading up on it, and there's two main programs, and forgive me because I forgot the name of them, that are canceled. And what these are, they're actually not only are food banks, but they provide healthy food and meat and vegetables to schools for school lunches. And this program is twofold. Not only does it buy provide it to the banks and to the schools, but it also buys it from local farmers. So you're providing these farmers a market for their food, and providing them a job and income, and the food is going to a good place. And you really hate to see that type of food not go to the schools, for our children. A lot of children, they don't get a good meal at home, and that's one reason that the schools, the school districts try to provide them a good meal. And you really hate to see this stream of food not be provided to our children, and let alone people that need it. And another reason the food bank part was important is that I was reading that food stamps, although you might qualify, they don't provide you enough. You might fall short by the end of the month or something, or you may not be able to buy the. I didn't quite understand that, but you might not be able to buy the same kind of food that you get from the food bank. Fills in the gaps, so to speak. So there is a purpose for it, and I do have. Know some folks that do receive the SNAP program, and I do. They live in a different state, but I do recall them saying that they go to the church food banks, sometimes because they either need something that they couldn't buy because they ran out by the end of the month or whatever. But I think that all of these things are good, and what really upsets me is this. We're not. They want to cut the deficit, but they're taking away these valuable things that help people, but yet give tax breaks to the rich, and it's just not a balanced way to do things. And
I hate to be the Debbie Downer, but the first most expensive thing in the federal ledger is in fact social programs. 3 of them: Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid.
Well, I don't know why you and the government want to call Social Security a social program when people pay into that all their lives that they work. And the rich people, they stop paying out of their income at a certain rate. So rich people really get a pass once they get over a certain amount. It's not a social program. It's a pension that we've paid into all of our lives, been taken out of our check, not even voluntarily.
Yes, and if we don't figure out a way to solve it, it's going to run out of luck.
Well, that don't make it a social program, and it pisses me off when people call it one. It's not freaking welfare. It's not welfare. It's not welfare.
You are arguing against what the president who put this in place was. He argued that it was a social welfare program in 32. That was what he argued. If you don't like
how in the hell can it be a social program when it was taken out of my income all my life and paid into that program? That's a pension. That's not a welfare program. I'm not going out there handing for handouts. I don't care what anybody call it. It's not a social program. You don't pay out of your pocket all your life for a social program.
It's defined as a social program in government.
Well, it's wrong.
Not just government speak, but in law. Well,
it's wrong.
You think it's wrong.
So when I get my pension from work, that's a so when I retire from work, I'm getting a social program from work. That's bullshit. You don't know what they may call it that, but it's not true.
Pension plans, that's fine.
It's the exact same thing. I paid into it and the money compounds. And the Social Security would be there if Congress wouldn't have got their ass in there and started robbing from it.
Well, here's the point. The point is, Marshall said there are 3 areas that are the highest expenditure of government money. But the distinction that I think Brian is making is that Social Security is not government money. It's not tax money. It's the person's money that he or she put into the system. It's not tax money.
I don't disagree with you, but I can tell you that the Republican and Democratic leaders in both the House and the Senate have disagreed.
No.
They've funded the trust fund to the tune of about $4 trillion over about a decade. And their excuse for it is that it's intergovernmental borrowing. So you can rob Peter to pay Paul,
and make Social Security go bankrupt in 2034 because Dick Armey and someone else like Nancy Pelosi, I'm only referencing her because she was speaker for a long time, ended up doing that, right? They robbed the country about $4 trillion. To put that in perspective, that is 4 World Trade Centers built entirely out of $100 bills. That's what $1 trillion is. And we've been spending it anyway. My point, Brian, is that regardless of what you think, those social programs, as defined by FDR, we call them social programs, they heat up the first line in federal expenditures. The next one is the interest on our debt. The third one is the military. And the fourth one is everything else we spend.
But anyway, what does that have to do with what we were talking about in the first place, though, which was the food bank and the weather?
You got off on
I'm not sure how you got off on that.
I got there by noting that when you're talking about the government cutting money, that it would make sense that the government would look at the largest line item to cut.
Well, these really aren't. Comparatively, though, what we're talking about today are not very big line items, really. Not much that the DOGE cut was really large items.
Well, especially with regard to the satellites. Those are Department of Defense satellites. They're not going to deactivate them. So the satellites are still gathering whatever information they are gathering. Not just weather information, I suspect, but who knows. They're not going to deactivate it. And I bet you, dollars to donuts, the microwave information is still being analyzed because they need to know for troop movement and to where to put our ships safely based on hurricanes. So I bet it's not like they're going to turn a blind eye to the information out there. They're just not going to make it available to NOAA to make it available to the general public. So if I'm correct in my assumption, and I acknowledge what I just stated was an assumption, then why do you do it? Why do you do it? What gain is there? And the other things that this administration has done, the cuts that they've made, they make an argument that people may agree with. Some people may disagree with their argument on why to do it. I still don't see the reason why they want to cut information that could save property and lives. Why? And I don't think anybody has been able to explain that, even those who took to the stage.
It was cybersecurity and budget.
I don't understand the cybersecurity issue.
What do you mean by that, right?
No, the saving money.
I don't think that was. They never even said how. They've never said how the money would be saved. They never said how much money would be saved. So you could say all you want. I'm doing this because it saves money. That doesn't make it so. So, but that's right. So if in fact it's saving money, then is it not incumbent upon the government to explain to me, who lives along the coast, why they are trying to, where they're saving money, how much money is being saved, so that I have an understanding of why they make my life at greater risk today than it was yesterday, literally.
Right.
That's the plan. Federal perspective, why they collect the money in the first place.
It would require the government answering that question. You don't think this question?
I'm going to say what I'm fairly certain. In order to get an answer, you would have to submit a FOIA. I don't think you can get an answer out of the Trump administration without submitting a FOIA.
Well, whether submitting a FOIA would be successful or not is not the issue. The issue is, why have they not explained this to the American people? The only answer they say is that the news media are sensationalizing the issue. That's their answer.
It readily explains stuff. It didn't readily explain stuff under Bill Clinton, neither George W. Bush, neither Obama.
Well, we're not talking about Bill Clinton.
My point is, there are lots of administrations that don't provide that kind of rationale. It's rather one.
Well, we're not talking about those administrations today, and we won't be talking about the Trump administration. The next generation of
chief executives. We'll be talking about that generation of chief executives. I guarantee you that if this forum is still alive, I will make this pledge. You can write this down and throw it in my face. That if the next president of the United States is a Democrat, and people come up to the stage when we are critiquing that Democratic governor, that Democratic president, and say, but Trump did that, I'm going to shut him up. I don't care what Clinton did because it has nothing to do with our discussion at hand. If Clinton did something, no, it doesn't. So two wrongs make a right.
No. I didn't say two wrongs make a right. I said it's the normal way the presidency is
Define normal. So if it's normal, we shouldn't critique it. Because it's normal.
No, I think critiquing normal things is a good idea.
Oh, okay. Then why did you bring it up in the first place?
Why did I bring it up with Brian in the first place? I felt like it was important to make the distinction when talking about cutting money that one of the places one should look is the top expenditure in the federal budget, regardless of whether we like what that means or not. I don't.
So let me answer your question. Let me answer your question based on the philosophy that you're trying to articulate and see if this holds water or if I'm totally misunderstanding your point of view. So if under President Trump, he authorizes the extrajudicial killing of an American citizen on foreign land at the hands of our military, and that is criticized. The response to that criticism should be, well, Obama did it, so it's normal. So that shuts up all criticism of current presidents. For sure, if we're going to do that, with all of the transgressions by this president, the subsequent presidents are indemnified from criticism. Indemnified, because anything a future president does, well, at least it's not Trump. Look what Trump did. Look what Trump did.
I said we think it's important to point out that the Trump administration is not unique in the way they're exercising this. That probably the better criticism is that this is the way the system is functioning as a whole and it's unhealthy overall. But it is normal. It's a normal that we shouldn't have, but it is normal. My point in saying that is the presidents, every president, references in legal opinions the person who was president before them.
But I'm not a president. I'm not a president. Neither are you. So okay, name one program that Bill Clinton cut without explaining to the American people why that program was cut. Name one.
Medicare. He argued that he cut about 50%, but all he really did was cut about 50% of 1% of spending.
And he cut Medicare, and he did not explain why he cut Medicare?
He cut Medicare, and he didn't explain properly how he cut it.
Oh, properly. He cut it properly, but he did offer an explanation.
He cut it and made it sound like he was alone, that he was cutting 50% or something.
But he gave he did give an explanation. He was disingenuous.
Explanation.
And so what was his explanation? Not for the amount, but for why he cut Medicare.
Getting in line with Gingrich, but this is my childhood, so I can.
Okay, but you brought up Clinton, not me. So that's why I'm asking you, Clinton. So he did give an explanation. It may not have been a satisfactory explanation, but he did give an explanation, right?
Sure, Gary, but if we analyze the Clinton presidency, I'm absolutely 100% positive we can find areas in which Clinton did not explain things to the American public. I don't mistake my position for being one of one, because it's not. I don't want the world to be like that. The world is like that.
I know, but Marshall, we cannot critique a current president
current president, Marshall's going to say, well, this is normal because so-and-so did it.
It doesn't mean reform, Gary.
Then why do you bring it up? What's the purpose of bringing it up?
The Trump administration is often lifted up as an example of a president that is unlike any other president.
Nobody has said that today in the course of this discussion. So why do you bring it up then? Nobody said that. Nobody said that only Donald Trump has done something like this. Maybe they think it, but nobody has said it. Nobody's articulated.
It's just the emphasis has been on the Trump administration.
Because the Trump administration is the administration in power and making the decisions.
I don't disagree. Presidents are not simply in a vacuum. So, they are able to use their predecessor's reasoning for what they do. If I had my way and I could wave a magic wand, I would tell you that it's normal, but that it needs to stop right now.
So are you going to bring this up every time so there's a critique of the president that previous presidents did things?
If it is one in which I feel like we're focusing in on the administration to the detriment of previous administrations tone setting, sure. I don't feel like I need to bring that up every time. But if we are using the Trump administration as an exemplar of things that are not really right or should not be done, it does help to know whether that was behavior that happened in the presidency previously or whether it was not. You can then take that behavior, even if it's normal, and say, guys, this has been considered normal for quite a long time. It shouldn't be. We need to do something different.
I don't see how it advances the conversation with specifically the topic at hand by doing this. That's like saying if my neighbor is a criminal and did something that's heinous, and we're discussing it. Oh, well, yeah, but this guy did something too, and the other one did something too. We're not talking about what the other person did. We're talking about what this
Gary, is not about that. It's about the use of power. If it wasn't objected to under 3 or 4 different presidencies, then why are we objecting to it now?
Now we get to the heart of the matter. Now we get to the heart of the matter. What is the use of us critiquing the current president if what the current president does is normal? Maybe I'll make that the subject of tomorrow's discussion. Folks, we're here Monday through Friday from 5 p.m. to 6 p.m. New York time. So until 5 p.m. New York time tomorrow, for the next edition of the Critical Thinking Forum, everybody be safe, be well, and peace out.
Thank you. Example, okay,
Kan
Thank you. Bye.
أنا سكت أصلا صراحة كوي ترى بس كان صراحة كيف أبغى كلام اسمه تصلي أنت بيجا ولا أنت تكون عبا نكونا بيجا مسمار مسمح سلزي ترداكي ويسلزي تقبل هاي طبعا لو تصلح هاي تشكل كوي نازل العسل كاخد من الدرس صلح هاي سلام كوي نازل سبات كتكاكي ونيكا أكيد كتبولون كودات وصوبي سلام ترخيب أنا مزول مزدور بيتون متسلم يبلي أبيكا بوليتيكا مردات تسلحون تسلم يبلي لو كيد لي حتى تسلح تسلم يبلي شو تسلم يبلي ده أنا تفي أتوم مردات مردات كيف بنفرح تيجي تسفير ده بالدليل البرمجي تتحدد إسرائيل العلماء نمسد مسألة لك سلام الله مع خاصة الدعاء صالحين كارية عالم كانت صالحين والغاي صراحة جينا بتحد مسمار كلمة خلقها مسنا يسكفتها كان غير له صالحين هذا مستقريت لنا من الناس مسنا يسكفتها عين خلو قبول كاي سكرشت قبول كاي سكحت قبول كاي سكتارات نمنا يتتارات كاتولو سبيل إذا مثلا كان اللي تسويه مقالات كلها قبل الانتحار سنتاي أي حدود كيما سترالي حدود مرداتهم أنا ترى بينكم حدود أما تقول ساري حسني ولا ظل كل زيد اليوم نقرأت كل زاد نتي نتمسح كسر ولا تبلزر سبي أنا شكر بين الناس زيادة ياخذ نتصدق يعني هو غير ترافرش سواء عنده يجرب تنقل من الإسكان سكنت هذا الروسي نخون سكن من الاسم كل باتي أنا مكان سكن مكان أرى تقوم نتمنى خاصة تلا إنسان دي كان لنا دايم سلكا يصير في داي نسأل حزبي أنتي إذا إذا صوفت ولا ممكن لك الناس والكان أخذكم من الداي الذي كسر حجي شغل تبعينه سبحان الله يفضلنا ملكا زوج سبب إلى مكان خير كنا سايسنا حجيا تنا إرتراوي جانلاتنا مزحة تحكتات كل الناس أبعد راو أسمر سبكمت سخطري خلها ومنظري حجي زي نقدر عملت قوانيفو التي تقول تحركات طبعا قراوي سنير وتخاني مزرعة معلنة حال بروباغندا لي مهرام تقوت عسل السنة تنخمع ترابين كل سبوتي مصرح أقل ميتوتي حجي بتاع حديث كاوي غير كان سبب ويلكا هذا لا يسمى ولا سمعني زي عدد ولا سبع زي عدد عبدالي كان غلط حرف المصاب اللي شاتوله تتسأل حال صادي قبل يرفعون أبي أمر مسموم خلو عبيد من قصات نحن سيزو كسر معسكرات تسريح لهم نعود من المدار تدورا هذا ويروحات تساري من نصر يقول هنا تخدد ناي تسرح وصلاة خير دلقا التي على درسي الجناتي ثم بروزار تبين سري نابس كذا قمت كل موسري أرتكا عندي قبل الفرد هذا يرداني كبسي أكاري لدريدر كسر كنت سكن أجد دور ورقة فابير النظم ومعسكرات حلف ومتاي حمد وانا فحاد وكلهم تلك ناي تسرح نادر دان مزين شو تسرح داخل دير سرح كندي حيلي ما بتحدد كسرح كندي ما بتخال ناشر ولا حموش الأوتو نسيها خطب تقدر ونياتو التي صرح ما يتسرح سلازر داكا نتدقى على الوقت قبل اللي نسيات ما سلازر داكا صراحة تقدر حجي بتاعي قلتي فريد ردو يتبلي خان حاجة حاجة زي عندنا هذا صراحة في الأيام ذات صندوق انت عارف زي تردى أعتقد حتى تكون هاي تردى أنه صندوق خير يقولون لي كم زرق والصلاة خاتي سرع ذلها إذا حجي نصور لايني مانياتو صندوق ديدالي شكلتنا عشكلتنا طبعا شكلتنا تسرع مالو
سلام سلام مثلا سلام ديدري أبز خبابي أو كأن أي سلام يركو حزوز دري حيلة تصولو مسمى على عينه عجين كده سرع ما نلو خلا أنا غير دانا جر تصولو كزي ترداك أكم زعينة مدرحات مسيحة حدد تايم باير داني بزولو خميجة ما مزيون سرع خميجة ما نعمل نحرك خمت قرب نورنا تنورنا زي تاكلو نور مدناني نحرك مسكزين نحرك كل تتمكرنا من الفتان شيء نزارب نحرك ما يقول أنا سبيعك ويتناد كاسك فلاتات ونيكا نسب سك فلات الله مسرد أكاو سون حاجة سوري كنت بتاعي أو سرع كم زلنات أنا من هذا نجي ما كان عاون حاجة سوري كريم كن كيد رد أكا سون تاي وان ما يقول سون هون يقول سون هون كلام شيء سون خمس كبري كعزارب لها كتوم صلاة نزول صلاة كم زلها بس ناي صلاة بس سامحها أدخل نجي أبزن كنكالنا نحبي ترداك صغيرات أكن زبطات متيحة تحدد أبزن الوضع ما كان كان تحدد تنصر شعور فتيم أنا أمر يزي خفر رسالة اللي كان مركز وسيكا مركز كان كنت نابزن طيب لكن نحن صحة عيديك كي تردو مسارها من صلاة أخي خوف دقيقة غير دون تسكنون دوران من هذا ويحمل سواعته ليس لعب مسرح أمها كان سرعي على تقرب الرحم كله دقيقة ترديو إسكالكوليشن كي يقول يتصندو دقيقة غير دون صلاتنا كم دخمة قريبو كم فرحة قريبو لكن لازم نتبدأتي تقول زي مصدق عليه Thank you.
Thank you. Remembers. وقال أنتو زلو. وسام زلو.
اللي يمكن من تستخدمها مصدق. أشكرا من هذا الناس أنا ما أشكرا من هذا الأسرة كنا.
أنا أي
ولا تصدق وعدك ما يبزح طبعا ما يبزح بتشقي لك عندنا ما يبزح بيكاسي كاو حد خمر دقيقة كان له صار توصل هذا اللي عندنا وعد هذا
ሰብ ጽቡቅ ጋር ማምሲክ ማለት ግን አቲ ጽቡቅ የረሳን አስነብሩ ስራ ወሲደ ፕሬሲ ሳይሆን የሚርማስ ዲስቲ እዚህ ና ስለሎ መልሴ ምናምን አድርገው ደረሲ ተራሱ በሃት ወለታ ሳይፈስ ማለት ስለይ ሱዳና ቴሪሲ ተራሲ ያበቃ ተራሲ አስመልሴ ገፋሲ ለምታይ ተርሱ ስለምታዩ ሌላ ለና ሌላ መጽያት የታ መጣለስ መስዋዕት ከፍተን ከመበደለስ ይሁሉ ሌላ ለና ግን እንደና ማቆኔ ዴፕሪቻና ቻና አቆ ለና ሌላ ሌላ ከሶይና ሲከፈል ከታይ خلق አማራሲ አታሙ ያሲ كل سنة من هذا الكاسي حتى موجودين سي جوا بروان سنة سلام تقول على صلاح جوا بروان هالكله ما يخافني لو هذا الكلام من يطلع زي ما رجعنا إلى أقول لنا سبحانه وتعالى اسمع بوريس خدنا على دي دم عمل كل سنة سبوتا لكن لا يقول حتى تيجي أنا سكرت كتشف تجيب معرفة أساسية ولا القوانين السياسية. فينا يعني أخذنا ما نجيب. فينا أكيد أنا كنت أسوق كلام على فاتو بعوزين ناس خمسة جو عندك يا ناس لو أنا أكيد أنا كنت أسوق كلام. أكتر زيادة أحكي. بس وزين ناس بس أنا ما بعرفها. ما أدري أنا لنا. لكن أحسن كنت أسيب. لكن أحسن تعليق ولا اتصالي كمان أجي أنا أحسن بس. ليس لا سلام لا ولا عم يجوا وهي شو تشتغل ولا ولا حاب شيء ولا باجي لكن ما هي تبغى تاخذ استعمال أنا مثلا السيد إذا أنا بدي شغال مارس ما راح أشوف مال بيجي ولا قبل يوم سمع يعني أنا تلبيسهم خصوصا جلسي أختي دارتي سلسلة وقطع أخذ جلسة سميعة مثلا سلسلة أنا بدي لو جلسة سميعة مالك لكن جسد حبس المليان علينا صبغة تحكي لحالي سوسايتي ومنتل السبب أخذنا عسد الأحسن هذا مالتي عسد خطة قلت الروح ولا تعيون بيروم مالتي مزيد ما تحضرين جدي وأطلع بس السلام كله تقعني هوا بالفعل مالتي عسد زي خاصة لما نسي كل شيء نسي هيك زي أنا قاعد بقول زي حتى تهم كلها كلها صبغات أخرى لأنه بنسي جوا كله نسينا سوى معه أصلاً لأننا كنا مفروضنا نقدر الهدى اليومي تزوي الإنسان نقدر كلام معرفة كتسي الذي تتبقى وإذا كنا تعرف بس تبصي سبورتور لو تبغى من سيانا رجيم حتى تبغى لترى من سيكلو حتى تبغى منه أتذكر ما أكيد أقول لك ولا هو ما تقدر ما كنت سأسمع سب لقد كان بسمع كده وحتى لما سمعه سأسرع التي ما قدرت التي ما كل هذا ولا حتى تقول لي هذا التي كان ترجع حتى يقول ما نحتاج ترجع كذا تقول ما بدنا نسي أي ترجع أن تسمع كذا اسمه ده شعور وترجع نفسك على سبيل الخطأ تسريح لها ما لشوا آخر ممكن لنا هدي أخذت زربات حيش دولي ما قدر يستدل تغيره كل ساعة هدراويان أيوة دزوجي بيقدر ما يستنى كل ساعة هدراويان توي لما أنا كلهم فريش وتيجي سؤال اسمه كله أصلا ده كل سؤال خلي بالك من الجسم كله بدي بقدر كيف كذي كل ما جسم سبعة أيوة سيد هو زي كذي لازم تروح لها عند العلي وربما تناسلها ما صوته ولا صوته مري أصلا بتصير صبوا مرة لازم تكون حدا لك لازم تنتهي لما تتسجل كتير نوع من السياسة لو لازم تيجي تقول له والله صبوا حتى ليس لك وكذا وده فيعني لا تقصون سلمتي كارسل لها وسلمتي زي كارسل سلمتي يعني مسؤول خفر عليك تحسيكم كبير فما جنسل تدانس حتى شو كان كسر وتأكل فوري دي ستة تلاقون أفرادها في الأرض أحيانا تقصد الدوي ورجل الدوي يعني معروف ان تسبب الأب بالنسبة للسبرس والمسؤول برضو أفكر له ولا خطرت تاريخا نفسي لا أنا ما تيوم فريقا له مالتي تيوم فريقا كذي يعني الكيس كمان سمعت لكم من رسم كوكو سنة عن بصوم مدن أعتقد برضو إنه نايس إنه مدينتي أنا مسافر بقولي لهم كم يوم ولا ده ما تيجي فايدة والكمشة الصراحة زي كذا السبب أصلا سامع زي ساعة كي جدا طيب مش بقول له لك ده هيقول بالعكس إذا طلعت ورس كان معه كده هو من غيره أكون اللي هو حبيب من حط كده هيقول تلعني إذا صيحة تكلم بريبك أنا ما يصير كل ما تنسلزلهم أنا مسلزلهم يفوزوا من فريق عسي ترى هم كلهم لهم ما بدي كانوا قد ما كنتي بالصدفة في يومسي زي ما كنتي بالصدفة في يوم بدي يبغى في يومسي كانوا بس بقاسي سلام تيوم في يوم سلام تيوم قرار تلاصق ليس يوم أنا ولا كل هذا الوقت نقول نقولات زبر معناه يبلغ كل إذا زغفل وكل معناه يبلغ معناه تلنا أقول لنا مريض أين تلنا مريض نحن كلام من أنا زغفل من زغفل بس حتى يبلغ في يوم ما يصير لا تبي كفر دولنا اليوم زبر قالوا سكيتهم سبعة حالتي نزي سو نزي هذا اللي هو اليوم وهم يقرأوا دايما هي مصروف على المزامات زي دلوقتي زي مصروف زي محل حقوق زي المدرسة المزايد مدرسة المزايد نفس المدرسة صومية أنا حسب أكون زي إنه يوم ولا عمرنا عشان تكون سيد الله حتسيب زعما زي شكرا يقولون لي لحظة ونص تايلا من داخل فضل فدروا فايدة ولا فايدة حلو منه لا سوى زي نقطة فرقان بريد ولا حتى لا يهم فايدة بلسة بلسة عندي لا ولا فايدة وشيء زمان كان ترجي مختلف زي كان هذا الشيء لازم حسب لازم حسب الفايدة أنا يصير الفايدة لازم من سنسار كذا الفايدة ترجي أدلاني على المسلم كمان أصلا مزيد صبوا وما غير زيوم تاجم زبرة بسيط وما جاني حقوق خلقا بالسلام نمطو لكن إحنا نفرد المزايا راوي ولا عادي المزايا مش إحنا رابط ليس كمالهم أنا هم بدأي سلسي نسوق لازم تفاسي وكا مسواتي صفن سلام وكا بكوفي كاديس كاسية كتارا دي هنسوق كان سلام تلتي سلام سلسمانس لمن تايلان نفسي هذا سبب يوم في كذا وكم سبب سلوسي ذكرهم يمكن برضي الحوالي قبل ما تقولين بس حتى أنا مثلاً قالوا إذا حدا في إذا كان نزل روحاني عم يبغى حتى في مثلاً اللي جي نزل سبحان الله لو ما لازم بعيد نزل بعيد من هنا وكل المخدرات ما جالس بعيد نزل بعيد من المخدرات يعني بعيد خطير وقام تفرق من هنا يعني الطريق لا حتى لا تقولون على الدنيا اليوم كان حسب كسبنا على زي ما بنقول أنا هذا شيء أتراوي السوق تيجي تراهي ساي مثلا غير تطلع يقول أتراو زر كذا لكن أحيانا يتراو سيدنا أيضا كل يفصل أمر كل شيء عشان لازم أنا سيسألون من تشوف الناس يوم ساي مرة ما يقول يوم كيف يعني إذا لما يحاول يتفرس أو يسأل نقطة نقطة سبعة أستمر السوشيال ميديا وينتزع حقوق البلاء نزع سوسي زعما صدر من الإنسان ولا على رسوم من السلام أو بلاد رسوم قتلوا من أجل التهمين هذه تكلمي مرحبا دكتور سيكي مسكنكي الذي ተምሃሮ እንታይ እዩ ሓቲትሎ እዚኣ ጌታቸው ረዳን ጻድቃን ዝርከቦም ናይ ህወሓት ሓለፍቲ ነበር ምስ ብልፅግና ምፅባሩ ንፅምዶ ስክታ ይፈጥር ዶ ፅምዶ ናይ መጨረሻ ዕላምኡ ክሃርክ እንታይ ድፊት ክግበር ኣለዎ ባህሎ ሰቤታ ትወከፍ ኣባቲ
ኩናት ሌላ ኩናት ሰራው ማለት ነው ወስዶ በጅት ሶ አቀሻው ከዘር ወረደ አሞ ሰላም ዝደል ነው ኩናት ዝደል ኩናት ዝደል ለጽራብ በልሽ ዝደል ነው ማታ ሰላም ዝደል ነው ሐሰብ ነው ኩናት أتعرف حال سياسي على أن يستعدي ورفع سياسي كل جزء وعكس ربما مقام فريق جربي وشرع الكلام ثم يتعب بما يبعد عن المسلم أشكر من الرجعات التي السلام سويكاتي لما السلام إذا السلام زدلي نتبين زدلش السلام يلقى مسار كتاب كل من الزوال دارو مالتي والسلام يلقى بنزين كاسر أسكر السلام ስለዚህ አብራገር በስነ ስርዓት መልሰዋል ወይም ማማቸው እዚህ ቆሜ እና አብነት ኩይናት ጀነራል ኮይኑ እዚህ ማለት ላይ መንግስት ቢራ የብሪነት እና ሰዓት አንጻራና ስባራ ለኩይናት ወላ አንድ ነው ሃይና እዚህ ቢራ ዘራ ካናይ ኮና ላይ እንደሰራሪ ካንጨታሽ ይወጣል ለዚህ ላይ ቆም ነው ካራቦ እዚህ ማለት ነው መንግስት ላይ ነገሩ ባዚ ነው ላይ ወሽ ተሰራማ ነው ፈንጨ ويبقى حاجة كان حاسب بس كويناتي أنا قديش بقولتي أنا لكي ما كويناتي تولى بدي تسوي زي ما بقول بس أنا ربحنا يقول بدي كويناتي تقول من هالوين كم يعني كل وكانوا عملت تسوي راسي كويناتي تقول أنا أقول هذا الناس اللي يقول دائما يقول دائما لا ولدي بدي فرق كانوا وإذا تاني بالكلمة كانوا رجعي بقى وقتنا دائما تقول إذا سألت من يتكرر عمل يعمل أنا في ميديا كل شيء زغاونا تعليق والناس تتكرر بنا ولا تمشي مثلا أنا نزود كم يأتينا يجمعون شيء نتايج بينهم كثير ما بس شمالي في الدنيا بس شمال كثير ما سيد ناشين ديرو كثير هو من أيضا الناس ديرو من المسؤول أبد يوم بعث تعسين وعمل شمال ديرو كثير لازم تشتغل تعامل تزني تنبري لازم المنتهى تقرب كل شيء نقدر masalah asal-asal di mustahil kita di negara kan seperti itu. Jadi mereka memfasilitasi hasil sesuatu yang terbuat seperti itu. Seperti sekarang. Sekarang sebelum kita zio, jika dia orang pinat searching idea yang dilakukan Al-Quran itu, soalnya nanti pinat, dengan dia sebelum betul betul dia nama dia salam kerana itu menurut saya dari hari saya dan bahkan nama salam juga menggunakan pinat juga menggunakan itu. Aku tak nak mati bercakap siapa. Sedang saya macam ni maksud kita kita ada tahu main sesuatu ada sesuatu. Atau naik rumah dengan main kita sama jalan atau main sama lagi. Bahagian kita juga macam macam itu. Contoh kasus orang sama macam sekarang pinat kerja lebih macam Nabi macam orang bertiga macam sebelum ayah habis orang. Cuma misalnya atau kita macam lain institusi orang yang berkata semua orang kasasi macam apa tu. Sekarang ada nama ni dengan itu yang serang. Memang sesuatu berat juga. Memang sesuatu berat yang terjadi. Setelah lalu itu cukup sudah berusaha. Kamu tak ada nanti lagi. Ajar apa yang kita lihat begitu untuk sebenarnya. Bersama dengan kami kuliah. Kamu boleh dia nak apa? Kalau kita sedang lain nak. Jika sudah haji nak cuma pergi berdua. Sudah semua majul kepada dia. Jadi semua ada di mana nak usaha wajib. Sebenarnya ada di sini nama orang haji. Ambil kita yang sekarang kita kenapa? Semakin lama sih macam macam kita guru-guru sekarang yang begitu. Bila kita sedang naik pun, kamu tu tak berjual tekor. Jadi thank you.
Thank you, Amanda. Thank you. Roha, Rona, Eka first.
Awesome. Dan secara pilih misalnya, sekitar efek turun buat sekitar efek nomor sekitar apa yang sih? Entah kira masalah macam TDF, mungkin tak sesuai masalah dia sih akhirnya kira, akhirnya dah, nah foto yang start dengan
تأتي بريطانيا غير مستسامة حي ننفذ كان حي ننفذ الناس الذي قال وشينو كانت رئيس الوزراء هذه ممكن يوم أديس أبابا تدالوت المنبر وشينو يحجي عالمنا يتقرأي بالدخان وعدادي بون بوشتي بكنزبوهون بخبابها ونتهم بقد الشرحنا فتروا نتا تقرأي كنتنو ويسرلو سواء تارجون دو تساقمالو عم تساقم برساتهم دا أتارجون دو سمسميلو بذلو كتي سوقون القلو تقرأي كتي زكت تذري وتسلحمان زك دابنا نقرأتي خيط سلزلو تاينا خون خينا لقوم على عقي لما ينداتر تحريت كان تحتنا ورده أما جرشان لازم تقرأي تحق إنيا ما يكريو جميل يجي زرعي لما جمرتها ጉዳይ ፍትህ ጉዳይ ዲሞክራሲ ጉዳይ ከዘመን እንደተባለ እስቲ ለፍታሪክ ነው ያለ ደቂቃ ካይዳ ብዙ ተዋውቶት አሁን ከብዙ ተባባልነት ከሆ ኺሎ ነው ብዙ ሰው ማጋገም ነው አውሽ ተግራይ ተወሪ ቢቆረሳ ደገሙ ከይተረፈ ተማሚ ናይተጋሩ እዲኖ ሞኒሮ እዲታይ ከንሱ ጋር ይውላ እጅ ፍየሩ ደግ ናይተጋሩ ፈለይ አብደከ كان حياة ديرو كنت سكروس الدبلوماسية والمسرحة كذا بس ما نعرف نتصابون عليهم نخرجي ملكسات يجي تلقى نيرو وزعني من قصاص ماني فرنا من باركلة نيرو نودي بوم صح نقرأ نقول نيرو أدخل ترى بتاعي هم يجي أنا جرش تحت الناس يوري لهم ساتهم تلك تقرأي بذكرتها أو تسولوا يعني رات تدخل تلاقي كلام حينا بس أنا يسولوا كوزو مين حتى نوع كوزو تبعيزهم هلا ويجي أبزلون أنا على خيرهم يجب أن تستبدل أن تقرأ بينا حاما استدخل مغينه ولا دبلوماسيا أبلا لي واحد تيجي في سيد صادي ورجع يفضل لكن نايل كنيجا زداير هيك ساتهم بسرعة وذلوا صحة كليلة أنزل أنا ستك زي أمير كان نتمنى الرسول بزلوا بزلوا سوا ندخل بينات كايرو زليو لكن ما حد يعرفهم سبستيني بارتمنت وسوالات كانوا تمشيلتها زيارة تيرسل زلوا وقلت رايكا كاوز وزي جنرالات ولو بعدهم يتاجوا زركوا سبنسنا هاينا بزي صح سرعة تبونا قروقا قلت رايكا يوجد ميرايجي قدنا عامز تكفيو لبرتين زلي وين يرز أوعاد قالوا بتتبلي دنيا أي دنيا يرز تغير بتتبلي واحد تاينو نختار من خمس العالي يرين سؤالنا ريفورم بعد ديمقراطية بعد تاني political مسرح تاعي كذا زلوا أو كيلو مكان فلان زياد تستميلهم نيرهم أجيب نيرهم بصون أيوة حكيم أقدرنا نيرهم ساتهم تراي تواتات يوم ما نيرهم تزون نروح نتعدي في الوسطي تودوا شاشة دي تمعزم زيارة تنقصوصا لزلوا يناسي تحمغات تناي كنا نمدلوا ستوديو محلوغن قلفوتي ولا تدري تدري تتقصص يتمسح سيورني أبدفع ناس أفتفيت في سماها لنا هيجي مساوي جيبنا ولا تتدي في البالا وتتسبيرو يعني يخفد تبايلو ورد فسافتو ينزاتي نام خلنا تبقشوا المعلو يكذي مغادة لنا ورد تتدي ستتبقش معلو يدبي يعود هذا النفوس مسحيت بالي بدل تقوى سرعة طبعا حسنا نحسيبه بدي من أول شيء كنقو السوق من هذا كان مليشيا نظام مثل سوق مكاشا وشو ولا التناقض على السوشيال ميديا عندنا الوقت نفس الوقت ما هي يوم كذي نحن يوم سأرام بلاي تيجي نتقابل كان كلنا عن بروسون هنا بس نقول شيء نجد حق ويقول يوم بتعنا ما نعرف من بلد نظام تناقض مالتي تناقض سوى هنا أسماء بين البلد سرحت هي هذا مسلمنا وقالوا بلو كذي نعمنا حتى أديس أبعتها صح مجمع كتابات فينا طبعا كان الحرامات دليتهم زنبرة بتبقى النسخ وتشخلنا سراويدون على حين كنا يبايدوا وتشخل زلام مسان كمان ينون فون تقول دامالتي ولا زعج مالتي زعج وتشخلنا زلام مسان كنا مش تاسموا عبيلو حديبي وتشي تاعتهم كنا نعيزوا عن نيري زلام مسان نيري سراويد زلام مسان نيرو بس صورنا نيرو كل وقت نيرو من حتى سراويد لأن زنبرنا موت نيرو أتسموا عبيلو حدهم كله تايت علامات وري أنا بلغ زارون سنتين دلبا
ሓሲቦሞ ዝነበሩ እቲ ናይ በዓል ፃድቃን ናይ በዓል ጌታቸው ረዳ ብችለ ረኻብዮ ነቲ ሰራዊት ቋፅሮ ፈቲሎም ነይሮም ጌታቸው ረዳ ዝክሮ ትኸውኑ ሰለስተ ካብቶም ላዕሎት ሓለፍቲ ኣብዚ ሰራዊት ወረቐት ፅሕፍ ኣቢሉ ሰጊቦም ካብ ስልጣን ሰጊቦም ክማል ዝገለሉ እዋን ዝክሮ ወዲኹም ነቶም ምስኡ ዝነበሩ ኣዘዚ ሰራዊት ንዖም ሒዙ ነቶም እምቢ ኣይንገብርን ኢና ዝበልዎ ንዓቶም ወረቐት ፅሕፍ ኣቢሉ ኣብ መዝነትኩም ወሪድኩም ኣለኹም ኢልዎም ክገርመኩም ሽዑ ምሸት ንሳቶም ንፅባሕ ሒዛ እዮም ምንቅስቃስ ገይሮም እቶም ካብ ስልጣንኩም ወሪድኩም ኣለኹም ዝበሎም ሰለስተ ጀነራላት ሓዊሱ ምስ ኩሎም ተሓተወት ተኣዘዝቲ ናቶምን ኣህዱታቶም ከይተረፈ ኣንስኪልዎም ንሳቶም ምትሓዝ ኣበይ መምበርቲ ዕላማ ዝነበረ ንዓቶም ኣብ ትሕቲ ቀይዲ ዝኸትዎ እዮም ተንቀሳቐሶም ገይሮም ነቶም ሰለስተ ጀነራላት እቲ ዕላማ ዝነበረ ነቶም ምስኦም ሕራይ ዝበሉ ክበዓል ወልደን ጥሩ ገለመለ ሒዝካ ነዚ ንፅባሒቱ ንድሕሪ ፅባሒቱ ከታ ነዚ ንዓና ኣዶባት ኩሉ ከምቲ ይመደብ ነይሩ ንክትፈልጥዎ ማለት እዩ ትነግሮም ኣነ ነዞም ደናቁር ኣብ ዩቱብ ኮይኖም ዝፍክሩ ናይ ብልፅግና ተላኣኽቲ ሰብካ ፈሊጥዎም እንጂ ናይ ብልፅግና ተላኣኽቲ ምኳኖም ክሕቡ ይክእሉ እዮም እዮም ከዓ ሰብካ ክከላኸለሎም ኣይክእል ሓቂ ንሱ ስለዝኾነ ደናቁር ስለዝኾኑ እምበር ሓሲቦሞ ዝነበሩ ነቲ ሰራዊት ሒዝካ ናይ ትግራይ ማለት እዩ ያና ከይደ እዞም ዛላብ መሳተፍ ሓዛ ክበሃል ሞ ሽዑ ዶክተር ክጅምር ሽዑ ፌደራልካ ረዳት ተባሂሉ በፂ ወሰም ይትመደብ ነይሩ ምሸት ከባቢ ንሳቶም ነቶም ሰለስተ ጀነራላት ዲስሚስ ኣብ ዝገበረሉ ጌታቸው ረዳ እስማዕ ኣለኹም እዞም ሎማዓንቲ ክነግረኩም ቤት ሓቂ ኣብተ እዩ ፀገም የብሉን ነቶም ሰለስተ ጀነራላት ዲስሚስ ክገብር ከሎ ሰቆም ከሎ ሂዱ ኣብ ስልጣንኩም ወሪድኩም ኣለኹም ክብሎም ከሎ ንምሸቱ ከባቢ ሰዓት 6:07 ቢሉ ኣነ ንባዕለይ ኣብ ትግራይ ተደዊድኒ እሞን ይትመኑ ማለት እዩ ሰብ ኣለዎ ሙሉእ ትግራይ ኣብ ሙሉእ ትግራይ ንምሸቱ ከባቢ 7 መካይን ዓበይቲ መካይን 7 መካይን ሰራዊት ኣራጊፉ በዚ ራያን ከባቢ ማለት እዩ ንምሸጡ ማለት እዩ ስለዘይንዛረበሉ ሰዓት ስለዘይኣኸለ ምስፀጣ ምስ ገለ ስለዝተሓሓዝ ኢና ንዛረብ እምበር ተሓሲቦሞ ዝነበሩ ሱ ገርና ንፈልጡ እቲኦም ካብ ስልጣን ኣውርድ ኣቢሎም ሰብዓ ዝኾነ መካይን ኣውሪዶሞም ኣብ ግንባር ራያ ትብልዎ ከባቢ ማለት እዩ እቲኦም ክጅምሩ ሞ ዶክተር ከብሉ እቲኦም ከዓ ሕውሽ ኢሎም ከዓ ልዎም ይትመደብ ነይሩ ማለት እዩ በዚ ቢልካ ነቲ ኩናት ባዕባዕ ተብሎ ዕላማ እዚ ነይሩ ንሳቶም የተፀበይዎ ግን እቲ ክከታተሎም ፅንሓ ሓደ ካኒ ንሳቶም ተጀመሩ ከሎ ብዓዲ ግራት ክፀራርቦ ጀሚሩ ማለት እዩ ናባሽ ነቶም ሻዕብያ መኑ ኳነ ቤትፈልጡ ማለት ከነላልዮም ሻዕብያ ደናቁር ኣብ ዩቱብ ኮይኖም መንግስትና ንፈለጢና ድሉ ደናቁር ከነላልዮም ሻዕብያ ማለት ነው ከና ከነላልዮም መንግስት የተመሩ ኳነት ማለት ነው ኣውዲቃትን ላሙዥ ትድሕዝነን ኣውዲቃት እቲ ድሕዝነን ግን ናይዞም ደናቁር እልፍ ደንቆረራ ዓግቲ ኮይኖም ክዛረቡ ከለዉ ዋላ ንዝድቁርሎም ክሽፍኑ ዘይክእሉ ማለት ድሕዝነን ማለት እልፊ ደናቁር ናይ ካብ ፍልጠት ነፃ ዝኾኑ ሰባት ዓሞም ስለዘይፈቱ ዓሞም ተዝፈቱ ነይሮም ዓሞም ዘምስኦም ነይሮም ልዕሊ ዓሞም እዩ እዚ ንዛረቡ ዘለና ኣይፈልጥዎን እዮም ንዝመፅ ዘሎ ሚእቲ ዓመተ ተመራሚሮም ኣይፈልጥዎን ግን
Since we got to consider the fact that the U.S. has to you know, typhoid, smallpox, these people it's just a lot of inconvenience happening before. Unfortunately, the U.S. is involved. So when you think of Israel and how close knit they are with the U.S., biological warfare is kind of where it's at. The sad thing is the next step into cyber, blocking out any type of visual or, they're killing press, that's just staying away from propaganda.
Your mic's a little bit muffled, but Marty, even to your point, when you look at what happened with smallpox and how it spread within the indigenous the community, they on purpose distributed
whatever. What America's doing, at the end of the day, they want to go ahead and get uranium yourself.
Yeah, but they actually say uranium. So they are willing to negotiate uranium enrichment for civilian population use, which is fine, right? You need it for medical, you need it for power plants, and they were supposed to have up to 20 power plants, but because of a lot of other issues, they only have one.
Do you know what they want? They want, and I disagree. 9/11 was never done by Muslims. Never. They never came from us. I assure you what. We do not do that. We only go to war when we are attacked. But it's incorrect for us to go against. We have to apply ourselves to the law of the government unless it goes for ourselves.
I got the ammo, but there are some extreme Muslims.
I know. They can be, but if you ever looked at the way the structure of 9/11 occurred, you look at it. It occurred from the bottom first. So there were bombs at the bottom. Watch the video. It wasn't the helicopter, it wasn't the plane. Just watch it. People just want to believe what they want to. As a Muslim, I wouldn't believe I'm a bloody rebel, sis. I know I am a Muslim. I believe in Islam. I say, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah. I will stand up for my religion because my religion is a religion of peace. It is.
But she's a bloody revolutionary.
Propaganda, media portrays us to be something in which we are not. I'll show you. Mark my words. Just trust me on that.
Just trust.
Look how the Palestinians died. They died as martyrs. They did. Islam is not a color. It is a brotherhood, a sisterhood. Israel is going to be shown for their true colors. Now what? It only will expose it to now. They attacked the wrong ones. Watch.
What's the solution? What? Watch what?
These people. What is your question?
I asked, what is your solution?
This war to stop.
For the stuff you've just been talking about for, I don't know, 15 minutes, 30 minutes.
Water. Ask me a proper question and stop hiding. Come on. You clearly came up on the stage to ask me a question. I don't have anything against America. I actually like you up here. Ask me the proper question. I don't have a solution. The solution is for both
this is the Patty Show. They spewing all kinds of fucking lies and propaganda and bullshit. We are here to document their fucking bullshit. They playing their bullshit.
Quick question: how much do you pay for renting Canada?
So me and my roommate actually split $3,200 for a 2-bed, 2-bath.
Go ahead, Patty. Do your show. Do your shit, girl. You got the track.
Companion, help us pour out our hearts to you, honestly and sincerely. These prayers as our guide, help us feel close to you, dear God. Life makes warriors of us all. To emerge the victors, we must arm ourselves with the most potent of weapons. That weapon is prayer. Actions. No place too far for us. Tell me this. Is there some secluded spot in the vicinity where I can go to pray? If not, when asked. He had just arrived in Breslov, a town whose name the Breslov movement has borne ever since. Another place that would be most suitable, the Hasid replied, but it's quite far from here. Father, Rebbe exclaimed, what do you mean by far? Far from the mind or from the heart? But Nachman later taught, when your heart yearns, distance is no obstacle.
I got a question about this whole war situation. So, like, I'm a Christian, and someone's a believer in the Christian faith. Isn't it their duty to support Israel? Excuse me? Because Israel is the holy land. Israel's the holy land, right?
It's not our duty to support Israel. It's not the same Israel that was speaking about in the Bible. It's not the children of Jacob. Israel is a people. It's not a land. And the people that's on this quote-unquote Palestine are Eastern Europeans. Like, I met an Israeli a few months ago, right? At a body shop here in Georgia. He told me he was from Israel, right? I asked him, like ethnically, like genetic-wise, like where you from? He said, I'm Polish and Russian. I don't think that's Semitic people.
Yeah, but that's only like 20 to 25%. There are a lot of Arab Jews as well living in Israel. Right? This is Palestine. The Jews are supposed to be God's chosen people, according to the Bible. So, like, are you supposed, isn't it wrong to oppose the holy?
I suppose you listen to the point, bro. So it's not, first of all, the Holy Land wasn't Israel. It was Judea, right? And as far as the people, when you talk about Israel, Isn't Armageddon supposed to happen in Judea?
Bro, you trolling them?
No, it's a serious question. I'm not trolling.
What was the question?
Isn't Armageddon supposed to happen in Judea?
Well, if you're talking about biblically and that kind of stuff, you know, that's a whole different ballgame. But no, there is something called a doomsday clock. Excuse me. So that is something that people do actually look at, and that just talks about the proliferation of nuclear war or things like that. I don't know if that's what you're talking about. I just came in here. But if you're talking about something biblically, I don't know if we'll have time to get into that, but biblically, people do believe the end times will happen where Jerusalem, where that sits today, and that's why people fight over trying to erase Jerusalem off the face of the earth. Even religious books older than the Bible speaks of some of that kind of stuff, because that kind of fighting and stuff went on even in that era. So it's like a country like ours trying to deal with religious wars or things like that. I don't know if America became ideology or way. I don't know if that's what you're talking about, but you can't bomb that kind of stuff away. It's very difficult for the United States to continue to militarily think they're going to, I don't know, root up the problem that's going on over there. A lot of that's based on ideology, and a lot of that's based on religion and stuff like that, not necessarily resources. That's what I read based in the Bible. A lot of that's based on religion. Make sense to you? Well, the Bible talks about the end times, not nuclear war. The doomsday clock talks about, you know, nuclear proliferation and stuff like that. The Bible talks about the end times when God talks about coming to earth and how that 7 years, there's 7 years of peace if you read that, and then you go on to understand that when he comes, after that 7 years of peace, that's when Revelation's supposed to happen, and that's when the world is supposed to come to condemnation and all of those things. So yeah, the Bible does speak of the end of the earth.
Ashton, I think it's 7 years of peace treaty, but then it's broken after like 3 years, right? If I remember correctly.
The Bible holds steady for 7. I didn't read in the Bible or even other books. The Quran didn't talk about, even that did not talk about a contract being broken. I'd like to see that in the Revelations. It holds steady to 7 years in the Bible. The Quran talks about some other stuff dealing with the end times, but those religious books are pretty much on the mark with things that happen in the end times, including rumors of war. It does not talk about nuclear war, but it does talk about the proliferation of war throughout the earth, and that is happening right now over in that part of the world, because remember, in America, that wasn't even thought of in the Bible. It wasn't no one, let's be real, that wasn't thought of. But that part of the world is what they talk about, and that's what they believe the end times will happen, is over in that part of the world, not here necessarily in the United States. But the end times would affect everybody up here.
So I do want to that patient, I'm reading this and it's talking about genetic evidence. They are related to the modern patients. So when he was saying something about they're not the original, they are.
What is the name of this tribe now? Did you guys hear the question that the guy asked?
I know Patty did, but did everybody else?
I did.
I just came in on the tail end. I didn't know the name of the tribe that he was
Well, that's. You know, I was gonna have him ask the question again. S500, ask the question that you answered from the first question you answered.
Thank you. I was waiting to do that because I think Ashton might have the answer. So, Ashton, basically my question was, if you're a Christian, right, and a believing Christian, isn't it your duty to support the Holy Land? And secondly, as a believing Christian, don't you consider Jews as the chosen people?
No.
Right.
Okay, So I'm looking at the history right here, right?
If we can let the Christians answer, Patty, after you're done, we're gonna let the Christians answer. But you can go, Patty.
Oh, let the Christians answer.
No, I'm saying for you to go and say what you're gonna say, but I see Tony responding, and I don't know if he's a Christian. I wanted to hear what the Christians had to say first.
Right. So,
but say what you're gonna say.
So modern Jews are the descendants of Jacob, the sons of Judah, Benjamin, Levi, and they talk about the lineage summary, right? There's actually, they also talk about, let me go down further in this damn article. There is actually, they even talk about how they're related genetically. Their ancestry, and it says they share a common ancestry. These are the Ashkenazi Jews. Genetically, they are descendants of, I don't know why